Chapter 61. Duels, a chance encounter. You are listening at novelfull.audio. AN. Some people who think last chapter a repeat chapter, check out the earlier chapter. I had posted chapter 60 in chapter 59, so guys have probably missed chapter 59. Martina was just intending to watch all the fun from afar. She wanted to research more about the unique magic casting of these ninjas. Martina is, and has always been, a true nerd. She has always needed a passion, something she can use her brain on to its fullest extent. In her previous life, aside from the usual geeky mangas, animes and novels, it had been science. She was interested in what wonders science could create. And in this life, it was magic. Magic was so much better than science. With science, almost everything had been explored to its limits, and any breakthroughs would have needed her to reach those limits first. But with magic, there are no limits. These days, she's been researching how this hand seal magic works. Previously, she's already researched extensively about the workings of the wand magic. From what she's been able to glean, wizards don't store magic in their body. They channel it by drawing it from an unknown source. And the wand and the incantations make drawing and channeling that magic a lot easier. But somehow, the ninjas are able to draw that same magic through hand seals. She wants to find out the inner mechanics of how this whole system works. That's the reason why she was here right now, doing her research. But suddenly, someone called out her name. Martina. She suddenly had a bad premonition. Martina. 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 Soon, almost all of the Hogwarts students were calling out her name. Are they for real? Martina regretted those days when she had been showing off without thinking of the consequences. She didn't like violence. Even when she previously dueled, it was because she wanted to test out her magic. Now she regretted doing that because she's now expected to duel with under so much attention. This is like a nightmare for an introvert like her. But, if she didn't go, she'll be disappointing the whole school. Not that they would do anything to harm her, but they'd still have ill feelings towards her for letting them down. What to do? Martina analyzed her situation. Ever since the end of last term, she's no longer able to have the same leisurely and carefree attitude towards her life here. She had just found out that despite all the changes, Voldemort was still there, and with so many changes to the timeline, it was no longer certain if the light side would be able to have the victory again and at what cost. She'd been living with her head buried in sand, and the Philosopher's Stone incident made her face reality. Thus, among other things, she has also been trying to train her combat abilities ever since in order to be prepared. Though her command over her magic was quite strong, she had very little combat experience. And dueling in real life is the chance to gain that. Besides, if she experiences their magic up close, she'll have a better shot at learning more about the hand seal magic. Thus, despite her reluctance, Martina slowly stood up. Cheers! The crowd went wild when they saw Martina getting up. Up until now, they had lost the majority of the duels, and they didn't like the disdainful looks of the Mahudakoro. Thus, when they realized that Martina, the Hogwarts genius, was going to face them, they were thrilled to see her beat them. The crowd parted, and under the excited cheers of the students, Martina entered the dueling circuit. Endo Yuji stood at the other side, looking pleased. He wanted to take this opportunity to show his capabilities to Martina in order to impress her. Let's have a wager, Miss Martina. If I win, you will go on a date with me, and if I lose, I will go on a date with you, he said, brushing back his spiky hair. But the students of Hogwarts were enraged. Especially the guys. Martina is Hogwarts' treasure. Even they have only been able to look from afar, and this guy is blatantly hitting on her after disrespecting the whole school. No thanks, Martina looked at the boy with some pity. This conversation was currently being broadcasted and recorded with multiple devices. Since he's done this so openly, there's no way her family wouldn't find out about it. And that can only mean that this boy is going to regret his actions. Not wanting the boy to get himself into more trouble, she looked at Professor Flitwick. Can we start? Professor Flitwick nodded. Duelists, take positions. He called out, his wand much more ready this time. There will be consequences if anything were to happen to Miss Valentino. Start. Flitwick barked and Endo began his hand seals. Martina simply observed his technique closely, doing her research. Soon, blasts of concentrated air came in Martina's direction with an incredible speed. It was much faster than average spells of students. Martina simply raised her wand and a semicircular shield formed around herself which was quickly bombarded by the blasts of concentrated wind. BOM. Though this was much powerful than what he had used against Cedric, Martina's shield wasn't even phased and no fluctuations reached her even when shockwaves of wind rippled through the arena. Panting a bit, Endo looked at Martina in surprise. He was feeling humiliated for being so publicly rejected by her and he was also quite offended with the crowd's response. Hence, he'd used a lot of force in the earlier attack. Even the best shields wouldn't have been able to take that attack, but Martina didn't even seem fazed by it. In fact, not only Endo, even the professors and senseis were taken aback. Martina hadn't used any wand movements or incantations just now and the attack just now was powerful enough to obliterate any average protego. More importantly, the casting time was almost instantaneous, as if she'd done it quite effortlessly. After noticing the shocked reactions around her, Martina clicked her tongue. The spell she had just used was the one she usually used while doing her experiments. It's not uncommon for her experiments to result in horrible explosions. Thus, she had gotten used to automatically conjuring this shield in such situations. And now she had exposed it due to her habit. Damn it. Endo was regretting using that technique just now. He wanted to show his overwhelming superiority with that attack but Martina handled it like it was nothing. Now he had wasted all that energy for nothing and still looked like a fool. Very well then, he muttered, deciding to take it to close range. As Endo made hand seals for his next jutsu, Martina could already tell what he was trying to do. After all, she had observed his previous fight closely as well. It was the magic with which Endo had closed the distance between him and Cedric so quickly. To counter this, Martina recalled a familiar spell. Lucius Nidoram. She called out just when Endo was done with his hand seals. With a burst of wind magic, Endo was about to make his way over to Martina at incredible speed, just like in his previous duel with Cedric, but... Splat, his foot slipped and he fell forward with an incredible moment. Face first. The end result of Endo doesn't need to be described. Suffice it to say that there were a lot of teeth and blood. Professor Flitwick was paying too much attention on Martina and Endo was too fast, thus, by the time his cushioning spell reached him, it was already a bit late. Oh. I'm so sorry. Martina just wanted to stop Endo from coming into close range and she recalled the spell Axel had used against the troll and which had also made her slip. Thus, she used this spell. She didn't know that the guy would be stupid enough to charge head first even after she clearly used a spell on the ground, resulting in such gruesome scene. Looking down at the poor boy, Martina felt genuinely sympathetic. After all, she knows just how embarrassing it is to slip due to such a simple trick. At least unlike her, he didn't have his underwear exposed. Standing to the side, the senseis shook their heads in disappointment. This boy still has a long way to go. Under normal circumstances, Endo wouldn't have fallen for that trick but he was too unfocused due to Martina and the crowd. Damn it. Told him he should just stick with Quidditch. Many ninjas now wanted to face Martina. Endo wasn't the best duelist here. His main forte was Quidditch. For combat, there were many who thought they were better. Some of them had already dueled today with the other elites of Hogwarts while the others hadn't gotten the chance. Another one came, this one had fire and water dual element ability. He bombarded Martina with attacks powerful enough that any Hogwarts student would have lost to him. Too bad Martina's defensive spells were impenetrable. She didn't give her opponent the time to perform any more of his ninja tricks and quickly defeated him. Cheers! The Hogwarts students were now delirious with pride. Martina's name was being chanted almost with worship. She's really good, accepted Daphne with a sigh. Hogwarts had lost the majority of the matches today, and like any other proud Hogwarts student, it had left her feeling bad. Thankfully, they had Martina, who was so good at dueling. She's just an amateur, said Axel, not much impressed as he watched everything with using a low-level arcane eyes. Martina was not good at fighting. He wouldn't claim he was better, not with her clearly holding back a lot right now, but if she keeps this up, an experienced fighter who has observed her fight would be able to take her down easily if she doesn't use more of her powers. Martina. Amateur. Daphne looked at Axel weirdly, but then shrugged. Even though his claims are a bit absurd, but it's at least better than him simping over Martina like all the other boys, right? Well, Mr. Professional, can you do better? She asked playfully. Axel shrugged but didn't answer, and Daphne didn't try to expose him. She didn't really care if Axel was good at dueling or not. She was already crushing on him back when he was crippled. You're still in your second year. There's plenty of time, she told Axel as she bumped shoulders with him. With his talent and hard work, wouldn't Axel be better than Martina one day? Looking at the clueless girl beside him, Axel shook his head but still didn't say anything. His capabilities, only he needed to know. Sigh, that was a close one. After winning this second duel, Martina was thinking of going back. She realized that these duels were dangerous. She was unfamiliar with the ninja's way of fighting, too inexperienced, and she also didn't want to show off too much. If forced into a desperate situation, she might accidentally do some magic that is far too absurd for someone her physical age. Thus, she decided it would be better to retreat now. She had done her part, and it's not like Hogwarts doesn't have its own elites to duel these people. Just as she was going to alight the circuit and the Mahudakoro students were deciding among themselves who will be going, someone appeared in the circuit, facing Martina. What? It's her. Matsushima. Akiko. Akiko's actually fighting. So, Martina managed to pique her interest, huh? While most of the Hogwarts students were clueless, the Mahudakoro students reacted quite intensely by the new arrival. It was an auburn-haired girl with a serious face and a voluptuous body that was outlined due to her tight clothing. She had a short sword strapped to her back. The girl regarded Martina with curiosity. Let's duel, she proposed. Not knowing the girl's identity, Martina thought she might as well have another match. This girl's face looked quite cute and harmless, and she didn't want to make things awkward by retreating now. All right. This time, the cheering from Mahudakoro was equally intense. A.key.ko, A.key.ko. A.key.ko. March Tina, March Tina. March Tina. Looking at the crowd's reaction, Martina realized that Matsushima Akiko might actually turn out to be someone even more dangerous than her other opponents. But, it was already too late to back down now, since Flitwick had already asked them to take positions. Start. As the match started, both girls didn't do anything at first, both seemingly waiting for the other person to make a move. But then, Martina decided to make her move. She decided to finish this as soon as possible. Thus, she went on the offensive and fired a few spells at the girl. It's over for Martina, murmured Axel. Confused, Daphne wanted to ask him what he was smoking, but she suddenly went quiet when she saw the girl appear behind Martina with a kunai at her throat. Everyone who hadn't seen Akiko in action before was shocked. Looking back at the place she was standing before, they saw her image dissipating. Though the one who was the most shocked was, of course, Martina herself. Because her mind was already coming up with different hypotheses on how she did it, each of which required something absurd. Flitwick quickly announced Martina's defeat while asking the girl to put away her weapon, lest Martina gets a scratch, and Mahudakoro burst into cheers amidst the deadly silence of Hogwarts. You hold back too much. These were the words Martina heard from Akiko, and then she was gone, just as swiftly and silently as she had come. With that, the first exchange between the schools was closed, with Hogwarts students going back feeling unreconciled. That was clearly cheating. Yeah, how cowardly are these ninjas, sneakily attacking from behind like that. Well, of course they'll resort to this. Couldn't do anything against Martina up front. That's how they consoled themselves. Though there was one person who had completely different thoughts. Those techniques. This girl is something, muttered Axel, his eyes still throbbing due to excessive use of arcane eyes. Yes, while others might be puzzled, he had seen exactly what transpired inside the circuit just now. He was quite regretful the fight ended so quickly. He wanted to see those techniques a few more times and learn those techniques, especially since one of them was lightning related. Too bad, it doesn't seem like it would be possible any time soon now. The next morning, Axel went to train early in morning again. First, he sprinted some laps around the ground. Then, with his warm-up done, he entered the Forbidden Forest to do his main training, just like yesterday. Though, this time, something was different. In the clearing where he usually trains, someone else was already there, training so early in the morning. Yep, his training spot had been stolen by someone. And the person who stole it, it was none other than the girl who beat Martina yesterday, Matsushima Akiko. AN Final Duel. Axel vs Akiko in the Power Stones. If you want to read ahead and support me in writing this amazing novel, patreon.com/snollygoster. Thanks for the support. Chapter 62. Axel vs Akiko. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 62. A girl with auburn hair was currently training alone so early in the morning. At one glance, Axel was able to recognize who she was. She was Matsushima Akiko, the girl who beat Martina yesterday. Seeing his training spot being taken, Axel was at a momentary loss as he contemplated how to handle this situation. This clearing was quite deep into the forest and quite spacious and private. In short, it was the best place so far to train his skills, and he didn't want to lose it. So, he was wondering if he should ask this girl to take her training somewhere else or if he should compromise. He was going to go forward, but, looking at her training made him pause. As he watched, the girl performed hand signs in quick succession, in release. Touch of death. Dark energy surrounded her, causing ripples in the atmosphere. With that energy, she lightly touched a tree stump in front of her. Instantly, the stump withered and crumpled into powder, causing Axel to let out a low murmur of appreciation. Who knew that, after detecting the sound, the girl would jump in surprise like a deer in headlights and quickly look in his direction. Fuck, as soon as their eyes met, Axel had a feeling that he might have seen something he shouldn't have. Shing, in the next moment, sharp projectiles were thrown in his direction, trying to nail him into place. Axel was at least glad that none of them seemed to be aimed to kill. Wait a minute, he tried, quickly dodging the projectiles and even catching one on impulse, but the girl didn't seem to be listening at all as she quickly formed a few hand signs. Axel cursed. He couldn't just disappear or run away since the girl had clearly seen his face. The technique seemed familiar, as in the next moment, the girl appeared right beside him with sparks bursting around her. Will you stop for a moment? He asked in annoyance even as his knife appeared in his hand. Clang, it clashed with her sword which she had drawn in a flash. The girl's brows furrowed. She swung her sword again, trying to disarm him. Knife wielding, but Axel wasn't about to be taken down that easily. After all, with the fighting skills he had accumulated on the streets and combining them with the training and knowledge of the system, he wasn't about to be bested in close quarters at this level. In 2 seconds, multiple sounds of weapons clashing resounded, and Axel somehow found himself at a disadvantage. Damn, she's good, he accepted, but at the same time, a thrill arose inside him at finally being able to put his skills to some use. He could feel it. This girl has been trained professionally, with lots of experience in fighting, while he had little to no practical experience fighting like this. Thus, he brought things up a notch. Arcane eyes, arcane footwork, his eyes glowed faintly and the strikes were no longer as difficult to follow as before. With his feet moving quite fast, he was able to avoid most of the attacks, lessening the strain on his knife-wielding skills. The girl looked at Axel like she couldn't believe he was actually able to hold up, causing him to smirk even as their weapons seemed to blur, with only the sounds of weapons clashing and sparks erupting due to them. He was no longer backing down from the fight. At this moment, Axel saw the girl making a few hand seals while still holding the sword. A sound akin to the birds chirping was emitted from the blade as the blade was covered in lightning. Clang! The next clash between their weapons caused Axel to be blasted back due to the impact, with his hands feeling numb due to the lightning. Though, the girl only seemed more surprised by Axel. "You have lightning affinity," she murmured, and Axel grinned. He was no longer trying to resolve the situation peacefully. It was rare enough that he tried, but since the other party didn't listen, then he will just beat her first. Besides, he was having too much fun right now. Knife wielding, the next time their weapons met, the lightning was totally ineffective. Because, a dull glow was covering his sword. Yep, he had been holding back. Knife wielding allows him to infuse magic in his blade as well. He wasn't using it before because he didn't want to look too abnormal. "Surprise!" he uttered, before the knife slipped out of his hand, appearing in the other one. Stab! Taking advantage of her momentary surprise due to him negating the lightning damage, he almost managed to stab her. It was only because he didn't want the fight to end did he slow down imperceptibly, causing her to back away in time. Akiko looked between the small 1-inch wound in her stomach and his knife with absolute shock. Though, in the next moment, anger seemed to cover her features, at being bested by a close combat against a boy much younger than her who's not even a ninja. "In release," she murmured, forming a new set of hand seals. Instantly, 3 Akikos appeared in front of him with no way to distinguish who was real. The Akikos continued to make hand seals from afar. Lightning release. Lightning dragon. 3 huge lightning dragons appeared, one from each girl, creating an incredibly intimidating scenery, making Axel freeze in place. The smell of ozone filled the air and goosebumps rose on Axel's skin. "Well, this is fucked up," he proclaimed, looking surprised. There were currently 3 giant dragons made out of lightning coming after him. In face of such a situation, he still didn't draw his wand. He didn't feel like he needed to. He can confidently say that even after witnessing the power of the fire dragon jutsu, which looked quite similar to this one. Only, this time, there were 3. Anyone would have lost their shit, but not Axel. "I see." His hand curled into a fist. And in the next moment, he swung it. The fist connected with a muffled thud as another Akiko became visible, just a few feet away from him, this one rubbing her cheek as the dragons and other Akikos suddenly dissipated. "Are we done yet?" he asked. But even as he looked confident on the outside, he still thanked his lucky stars that he had arcane eyes. Those Akikos and those dragons were fake, like illusions, though very real ones. Thankfully, he was able to see through it and see the real Akiko coming for him under invisibility. Really, this girl was quite a monster. With these abilities, she's already better than most wizards he's seen. He felt like she was a genius on the same level as Martina. And that was a huge compliment considering Martina was quite younger than her. Only, while Martina is more oriented towards the academic field, this girl is pure combat. While Axel was thinking how satisfying that punch was, the girl looked at Axel with her mouth agape, her hand still caressing her cheek which was throbbing with pain. She didn't seem to be able to believe what had just happened. Shame and humiliation flashed across her face before it settled into an impassive expression. But, seeing that look somehow rang warning bells in Axel's head. Akiko's face was set into one of immense concentration as she formed the hand seals. Axel wanted to stop her, but it was already too late. By the time his knife reached her, there was a burst of lightning, and Axel was thrown back, his jaw hurting badly. What the hell was that speed? He wondered, spitting out some spittle mixed with blood. Fortunately, her physical strength wasn't much. Most of the damage was due to that insane speed with which she threw it. He looked at the girl shaking her hand as if it hurt. Axel rubbed his cheek. It was the first time after getting the system that he actually suffered a blow, which is quite an achievement. Usually, he'd get new injuries every few days, but ever since getting the system, he had begun to feel this sense of invincibility that he'd be able to get past just anything. This punch was the punch that woke him up and knocked some more sense into his head. That despite everything he had going for him, he wasn't invisible yet. Just now, he was too careless. If he was cautious enough, he could have been able to avoid that punch. But he had still underestimated her. This is enough for now, he thought as he disappeared from his place. Presence reduction, blend, true invisibility, soundless, traceless, he silently walked behind the girl who still looking around, trying to locate him. Petrificus totalis, he chanted under soundless, using his wand for the first time. The girl went down like a sack. Thanks for that. I had fun, he told her, though, he also learned a lot. Now, what to do with you? He wondered. He couldn't just kill her since even she wasn't trying to kill him, only incapacitate him. Besides, with her lightning and darkness affinity, she was quite talented, too talented. If something happens to her, it'll cause a ruckus. Wait a moment, her talent, the gears of his mind began churning. He then unpetrified only her face so that she could speak. So, why the sudden attack? He asked, looking down at her. The girl looked away, seemingly at a loss for words. That jutsu. The death touch, he said, sounding her out. There was a reaction. Her mouth closed, almost too quickly. Axel nodded his head in understanding. Let me guess that it was some kind of illegal jutsu, right? Judging by your reaction, you'd get into deep shit if it was revealed. The girl's eyes widened just a fraction as she looked at him with some surprise. Then, there was a flash of helplessness, and finally, she looked at him fiercely, as if ready to put everything on the line. Axel chuckled. You don't need to worry. I won't tell anyone. The girl looked at him dubiously. You won't. Speaking for the first time. Her voice was quite soft and childish, quite a contrast to her body and abilities. Axel frowned. She didn't seem to be questioning his credibility, but his ability. Don't give me that look. My will and mental defenses are quite strong, if I do say so myself. No one can get any information out of me. But, I want something in return, he said, looking up and down her body for signs of injuries. There was nothing serious. It seems that they don't have any reasons for grudges against each other yet. Akiko's expression turned sour as she looked down at her body. What is it? She asked through gritted teeth, looking as if she wouldn't agree no matter what. Axel raised an eyebrow. He had a feeling that she was making the wrong assumptions here. I want you to teach me all the jutsus you can. Sword wielding would also be nice. Akiko's expression blanked out for a second. That's what you want. Axel nodded, yeah. Sayako-sensei said I won't be able to learn much in her classes for a while and people with lightning elemental affinity are rare. She said she'd ask another student with the lightning element to teach me, but I shouldn't have much hope. Realization dawned on her, so, you were the one she was talking about. Yep. You must have rejected quite flatly, right? He guessed as he bent down, so that they were eye to eye, and Akiko looked a bit embarrassed since his guess was correct. So, said Axel, a dark smile playing on his lips, won't you reconsider, Akiko-sensei? He asked, pointing his wand at her throat. Akiko swallowed, turning her face away from him. What choice did she have? Alright, but you must sign a contract first and I'll need Sensei's permission. Axel grinned. Today began with an unexpected gain. Happy New Year, everyone. May you all write the 2023 wonderfully. The Organization. Chapter 63. The organization. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Akiko Matsushima found today's events quite unbelievable. The day had started well enough, with her waking up early in the morning and finding an appropriate training spot deep in the Forbidden Forest. She hadn't thought anyone would be there so early in the morning, so she had started training a few forbidden jutsus. But, as her luck would have it, someone actually happened to arrive at that time, somehow without making any noise, as if gliding. By the time she heard his exclamation, he had already witnessed her practicing the In Affinity Forbidden Jutsu. In, also called the Darkness Affinity, is the best for creating illusions and genjutsu. Many of the ninjas train their In Affinity to learn genjutsu, and most people at Mahudakoro thought that she had done the same. But, in actuality, she already had the In Affinity. And it was very high. It was at a level where she could use actual darkness jutsus rather than just genjutsus. But, that fact has to remain concealed. Because, excess of In Affinity is quite frowned upon in Mahudakoro since most of the criminal means are known to use the forbidden jutsus of this affinity. Of course, none of them actually had the In Affinity. This affinity is so rare that only she has had it in a century. Those criminals only used In Affinity jutsus by forcefully increasing their In Affinity to a level higher than the recommended standards. Thus, Akiko has always kept her use of In Affinity in public to simple genjutsus. And, this boy has seen her use the In Affinity Forbidden Jutsu. Akiko wanted to quickly perform the memory jutsu on the boy. So, she tried to stop him from escaping. But this is when the truly unbelievable part starts. She had thrown a few senbons his way to lock him in place, but somehow, the boy actually dodged them all. He even caught one in his hands as if it was no big deal. Akiko was shocked. Even the students of Mahudakoro his age can't do that, let alone a wizard with no formal training. She hadn't even expected him to move, let alone dodge everything. Thus, she didn't waste time and simply used her lightning jutsu, which lets her travel very fast in a straight line to quickly reach his position to deal with him at close quarters. Though, somehow, the boy blocked her sword quite easily. And with a knife at that. Blocking a sword blow with a knife is quite difficult as compared to blocking with the sword, but somehow, the boy did it. Not seeing any other way, she used Matsushima Kenjutsu. Kenjutsu equals sword techniques. Unbelievably, the boy was able to match her, with just a knife. It has to be noted that the Matsushima sword style is one of the best in the world, and she is a certified genius who has been training in it since she was 5. So, her Kenjutsu was at a level where she could even beat most of the senseis. Plus, she was using a sword while the other party only had a knife, which is quite a big disadvantage. And yet, somehow, the boy was able to stand his ground. He was skilled, and his techniques were exquisite, but there was a discrepancy that gave her the chills. He had very little combat experience. Swordplay is mostly about muscle memory and instincts. When an experienced ninja is using different high-speed sword techniques to attack you, you need a lot of combat experience and muscle to instinctively react to it. But, it was plain to see that the boy was doing it without any of that. This only meant one thing. The reaction speed of this boy is insanely high. Not only that, but he's somehow able to move his body to match that reaction speed. This means, his physical abilities are also insanely high. He's much faster than her, a lightning user, and the strikes which she delivered with all her strength and momentum didn't even cause his arms to shake. Oh yeah, and he was still doing all this with a knife. Even as they fought, he was getting better. He no longer wasted his movements, his technique seemed to refine itself and, the grin forming on his face told her that he was actually enjoying this. What is this? Akiko has never been in such a situation. And she thought she was the cheat existence here. She now knew how others felt when looking at her. Having no choice, she infused lightning in her sword to stun him. This will be a bit painful, but it was the best option against this monster. Though, her next big surprise, he had lightning affinity. He was able to endure the shock of that attack without having to infuse any magic in his blade. Even if not as rare as the darkness affinity, the lightning affinity is also quite rare. This is the reason why all the students at Mahudakoro were in awe of her. They don't know about her darkness affinity since it has been a closely guarded secret even before she became a student at Mahudakoro. Thus, it was quite a surprise that he had it as well. But then, it turns out that he can also actually infuse magic in his blade. He was just not using it. Has he been holding back all this time? The realization made her stunned. To think he didn't even consider her a big enough threat to use all of his cards. It was at this moment that she saw him counterattack for the first time. Suddenly, the knife in his right hand appeared in his left hand. Before she knew what was happening and backed away, it was already stabbed into her abdomen. Akiko blanked out for a moment as she took her distance from him. She had been injured. She had actually been injured. It has been such a long time since this has happened. She looked at the boy in a new light. This is no ordinary opponent. She had no choice but to take this opponent seriously. Maintaining the distance, she decided to use her second affinity. She used a powerful genjutsu to distract him, turned herself invisible, and used a sneak attack on him. But, he actually saw through her technique. Just as she was about to attack him, his eyes shifted away from the fake lightning dragon as they focused on her. There was a hint of ridicule in those faintly glowing amber eyes. Before she could react, a punch landed on her, smack dab in the middle of her cheek. The impact was so strong that her genjutsu dissipated into a puff of smoke as she was left standing stunned on the ground, barely able to keep her balance. It was such a powerful punch that she had to give him a second look to confirm that it was indeed thrown by him. The boy just stood there casually with a slight smirk playing on his lips. He wasn't even slightly winded, as if this was just a game to him. Seeing that smirk and feeling the disrespect, anger surged within her. No one had ever treated her like this. Lightning release. Lightning God mode. Without even thinking of the consequences, she used her strongest lightning technique, her trump card which she hadn't shown anyone. Since she still hasn't mastered it yet, using this causes her body to be sore for days. But, it amplifies her speed and reaction speed by a huge factor. The boy seemed to realize that he was in trouble since he tried to stop her. But, it was too late. In an instant, she felt pain all over her body, but, the world slowed down for her. She avoided his attempt to stop her. Not so fast now, are you? She thought as she punched him with all her might. But in the next moment, her eyes widened when she saw his head already moving backward in the last moment, decreasing the impact of the blow. Seriously, this guy was creeping her out now. She was so glad to see the fist connect. But, her triumph was short-lived as she felt her hand throbbing with pain. When she looked back at him, he had already disappeared, and while she tried to search for him, she suddenly found her body unable to move as she fell to the ground. As she lay there, the foremost thought that dominated her mind was, so, he was still holding back. Axel's day was starting out great as he discussed the terms with Akiko, and finally, they both came to an agreement. For a year, she would try her best to teach Axel whatever he asked if she knew it and if she wasn't breaking any rules by teaching him. This was the first term. Akiko didn't think Axel would be able to learn much in a year. The second term was, they won't reveal each other's secrets. Both of them were pretty tight-lipped and their mental defenses were strong, so they didn't worry about the second term. "The heck is this?" asked Axel, looking down at a piece of paper filled with densely packed kanji letters. He half expected it to explode. "It's a Fuinjutsu contract with the terms. You have to sign here with your blood," explained Akiko, biting her thumb and signing her name. Axel gave her a scrutinizing look. She didn't seem to be deceiving him. "System, tell me what's written. Is it the same?" Only after confirming everything with the system did Axel sign the contract. It was pretty much what they'd agreed on. Since this method seemed quite useful, Axel had Akiko make a few more blank secrecy contracts in case some other unkillable people found out his secrets. As Axel was signing the contract, Akiko looked at his name. Axel Hunt. Axel nodded as he realized that he was yet to introduce himself. "That's me, and I already know your name," he was saying, but he saw Akiko begin to sway on her feet. "What's up with you?" Akiko shook her head, trying to clear her head. She rubbed her cheek which was already bruising up due to Axel's punch. "It's because of that. It seems that the punch he had delivered earlier was still too strong." "Hey, are you alright?" "I tried controlling my strength," said Axel. After healing, he can't properly control his strengths. "So, accidents happen. That's strength." "Was after holding back," murmured Akiko, looking angrier than soothed for some reason. Axel shrugged, "Yeah. Anyways, I'm going to the hospital wing right now to get rid of this bruising." "Are you coming?" he asked, inviting her along. Both of them had a bruised cheek and Akiko also had a small wound from the knife. They wouldn't be able to attend their classes without raising hundreds of questions. Akiko shook her head. "I know a bit of healing jutsu," she said as she began to perform hand seals. But as she did the hand seals, her legs gave out as she collapsed on the ground. Seeing this, Axel frowned. This is not something that could happen just because of his attacks. But then it came to him, that last jutsu. It was too much for you, wasn't it? He deduced. Yep, he was right. It made sense now. That jutsu was too much of a cheat. He was quite eager to have her teach him. In the end, both of them ended up going to the hospital wing. Halfway through, Axel had to carry her using her wand since the girl was struggling to walk on her shaky legs. On a side note, he also made a mental note to also learn some healing magic. Anyways, why were you practicing that forbidden jutsu? You're already powerful enough as it is, asked Axel as he carried her. It would be understandable in his case since his opponent Voldemort is so OP that his current level is far from enough. But, why would she need to take such desperate measures? Does she also know that the world is going to be taken over by that madman? Or does she have some other enemy? Akiko's eyes flashed with complicated emotions as her fists clenched. That is private, she said in the end. Axel didn't pursue the matter further. Though it would seem that she did have a strong driving force behind her strength. No one becomes that strong for no good reason, not even with extreme talent. Take Martina for example. Her hunger for power isn't strong enough. So, despite her talent, which is actually better than Akiko destroyed her quite easily in the duel yesterday. They reached the hospital wing in silence. With so many students, of course, Madame Pomfrey wasn't the only healer. There were others and there were also apprentices pursuing healing as a carrier. The healer lady doing the night shift wasn't pleased to be disturbed in her sleep, but she did patch up their wounds in minutes. After that, she diagnosed Akiko. Merlin's bladder, how did this happen? Asked the healer as soon as she was done with the diagnosis. Axel was disappointed to know that Akiko was strictly recommended a few days of rest along with the treatment. It would seem like they can't start the training today since the healer refused to let Akiko off. Disappointed, Axel completed his exercise and attended the physical training class. What happened to your cheek? asked Daphne as soon as she saw him. The bruise was almost gone, but not completely. It's nothing. Just got punched from someone. Axel didn't know why, but he told her the truth. Daphne began examining his body in worry. Merlin. Are you alright? Are you hurt somewhere else? Axel looked at her, fussing over him with some perplexity. This situation is still a bit surreal to him. Not long ago, no one would have given a shit whether he died or not. At that time, he had never expected that he'll ever find someone who'd care so much for his well-being. This feeling is not bad, he affirmed once again. Though this time, he didn't take it too seriously. The last time he had this feeling, it was quite short-lived, Andromeda. Thus, he decided that he'll enjoy it while he still has it. Sigh, I'm fine. You're overreacting, he told the worried girl. Daphne looked at him doubtfully. Are you? What do you think? Daphne seemed to give it some serious thought. You don't pick fights you can't win. I think the other person is much worse off. Axel smirked. Smart. Though, who was the other person? Can't say, he replied, making her pout. Their banter ended when the sensei came. This time, there were comparatively fewer students, but still, there were plenty, including the ones who were there just to watch. This time, Axel performed better than the last time, but still didn't try out the obstacle course. After the class was over, as Axel sat at the breakfast table, some students came to stand in front of him, somewhat surrounding him. It was Damien Malcolm and his cronies. Axel looked around. Sure enough, Martina and Patricia weren't here right now. What do you mean he had a bruise on his cheek? How did he get it? And where were you while he got hurt? Demanded a furious Bellatrix. Tonks sighed. Relax, auntie, it's just a small bruise. And no, I can't follow him all the time, so I don't know how he got it. It was there when he got to the morning class at 7. Bellatrix banged the table in front of her. Then find out and report it to me. And don't let him escape your eyes now. Follow him everywhere. Or you're better off just going back to your training. Alright, I'll do it, auntie, please don't talk about sending me back to that boring place. And you have to give me some more details if you want me to understand the severity. Yelled Tonks, but the phone went dead with an, I'll think about it. Tonks sighed. Looks like I need to take this seriously. She had been treating this trip to Hogwarts like a vacation, but it seems that she can no longer slack off. Whatever, she was quite curious about this boy anyways. Why are both the sisters so concerned about him? On the other hand, Bellatrix had cut off the call because an important guest had arrived at her office. Right now, she sat face to face with an old man with a bald head and white beard wearing a yukata. This was none other than Yamazaki Hiroshi, the principal of Mahudakoro. What is it that you wanted to talk about, minister? Asked Hiroshi, his face expressionless and his eyes close. He wasn't smiling like he was in front of Dumbledore. Bellatrix decided to come straight to the point. I had a proposal. Well, let's see if it's worth my time. Bellatrix frowned. This old fogey was looking down on her due to her young age. The Kraken, she said, and at once, the old man's eyes opened. I'll help you destroy it. I don't know what you are talking about, minister. Bellatrix scoffed. Come on, you know exactly what I'm talking about, or at least, you hope I don't. I know all about the cooperation between Atlantis and Japan. I even know about the Kraken, she said, revealing her cards. This was the main reason why she chose Mahudakoro. Because the ninjas have a relationship with Atlantis. The Atlantis hires the ninjas from time to time for various purposes. But, there is one main mission that contracts the most number of ninjas. Kraken. And no, we're not talking about the creature here. Kraken is the name of an organization. It is the name of the organization. Hiroshi frowned, his eyes turning sharp. He no longer pretended to be ignorant. How do you know all this? Not looking down on me now, are you? You old foggy, thought Bellatrix as she put on a mysterious smile, I have my sources everywhere. Poor and oblivious Gorski in the cellar. The old man still wanted to check her knowledge. Why would we be interested in destroying the Kraken? Bellatrix laughed, why? Where do I even begin? You want to test out how much I know? Fine. Let's just ignore the number of ninjas you've already lost against them. It's a thing of the past. But, correct me if I'm wrong, but they're going to need your help once again due to the matter of succession. At that time, if you refuse, you'll be losing your very important client. And if you didn't, you'll be losing a lot of ninjas. Saying so, Bellatrix leaned closer. If that's not reason enough, then maybe because you might be interested in avenging your daughter and your son. In.Law, who died in a mission concerning the Kraken. After all, your genius granddaughter seems to want the revenge very badly. You wouldn't want her to go on that futile mission, would you? Akiko. At that, the old man's shoulders sagged, and Bellatrix knew she had him. Hook, line, and sinker. AN 3,200 words already. Combat and stealth, did I end up showing off? Power stones. Come read ahead and support me. Patreon.com/snollygoster. Chapter 64. Combat and Stealth. You are listening at Novel Full. Audio. Seeing Malcolm coming, Axel couldn't help but sigh. What the fuck does this bastard want now? This is the first time he is approaching Axel so openly. Until now, Axel is rarely seen at the common house and at any other place. Only the Great Hall is the place which he frequents every day. And this guy would never usually do anything to antagonize him in public since he had Martina's protection. So, what does he want? Wondered Axel. Hunt, you should stop, said Damien solemnly. He had an air of righteousness around him. Axel looked at him as if looking at a clown. Who are you? That broke his momentum. It's just like the arrogant fool to assume that everyone should know him. I'm Damien Malcolm. I'm here to stop you from continuing your disgraceful conduct. Axel tilted his head. He was curious what this guy was up to. Alright, I'll bite. What are you talking about? He asked. Damien smirked, oh, don't pretend to be innocent now. First, you seduced Martina to get her protection. Then you set your sights on the second most powerful girl, Patricia, and you get into the Slytherin Quidditch team without trial. It was bad enough that all the old members of the team had graduated, but you are making it worse by playing a role as important as a seeker with no skills and experience. You are a disgrace to House Slytherin. Looking at the guy, Axel inwardly shook his head. This guy is digging his own grave, he thought. In his previous observations, he has already found that unlike his older brother, Damien Malcolm is quite impulsive, despite his moderately clever mind. He doesn't think his actions through before acting. Right now, he must have seen that both Martina and Patricia weren't here and thought it was a perfect chance to make the whole house against Axel. And his plan was going quite well so far, since his words had the desired effect. Negative glances were being thrown at Axel right now. It was the truth that Axel's admission into the Slytherin Quidditch was quite abrupt. And unlike the case with Rose Potter, his admission wasn't taken too positively by the house. Damien was taking advantage of that to make things difficult for Axel since he can't openly bully him due to Martina's warning. But, he was too impulsive. When it comes to a fight, whether it's a physical fight or a fight of words, Axel's response is equally sharp. On streets, you can solve most things with violence, but not everything. Thus, Axel usually tries to solve everything with violence, but when violence is not an option, he is capable enough in the battle of wits. Looking at the guy, Axel nodded in understanding. Alright, let's not mention that you don't know whether I'm a qualified seeker or not, but you are claiming that I seduced the princesses of two noble and powerful families, without any proof or confirmation from any of the parties involved. said Axel, and Damien's face paled as he realized, he fucked up. He wouldn't have thought that Axel would use his brain enough to respond logically instead of getting flustered and losing his cool. Axel folded his hands on the table as he looked up at Damien, who was already regretting his word choice. So, tell me, Damien, are you ready to bear the consequences of tarnishing the reputation of these two influential families? Blimey, I shudder to think what they would do to you, especially the Valentino family. This is it. Yep, this is it, thought Axel as he inwardly grinned in satisfaction. Now he can take his revenge from the shadows and everyone would think it's one of the two families. Axel looked behind Damien as he raised his hand. Oh, hey Martina. Look at this guy. Before he could finish, Damien already beat a hasty retreat, his cronies following right behind him. Maybe his luck was too bad, but the real Martina actually came through the double doors at this moment and poor Damien fell back on his butt with just a look, causing the students who were following the whole conversation to burst into laughter. Meanwhile, Martina who had done nothing. Am I that scary now? Shaking his head, Axel went back to eating his breakfast. He had won the confrontation, but Malcolm's words made him aware that his admission into the team wasn't taken very well by some people. Guess I'll have to start soon, he thought. That was great, said Daphne, looking at Axel with shining eyes as they went to attend their classes. Axel was bewildered. Why are you so excited? It's not the first time he has had a fight in front of her. Usually she's not so thrilled. Daphne shook her head. It's just a Ravenclaw thing. I didn't know you could be that witty. I was already ready to move away in case you threw the guy across the table. Axel scoffed. What do you take me for? A savage. Daphne smiled but didn't respond. At this moment, Daphne's friends from Ravenclaw joined them for some reason, making her glare at them. What are you guys talking about? Asked Padma Patil. Daphne gave the girls a warning look. Something you guys have no business butting in. Come on, Daph. We are just trying to catch up. You never hang out with us anymore, said Suli. Daphne gritted her teeth. I believe we hung out just yesterday, or am I having memory problems now? She already knew why they were disturbing her and she did not like it. Axel's stats have been increasing too much. He already had the looks. But then he worked hard and slowly improved his academic abilities until he climbed to the first position last year. His looks have improved and he's tall and muscular instead of his earlier short and skinny body. Now he's also a seeker in Quidditch. So, of course the bitches are now flocking around, smelling meat, and Daphne absolutely hates it. Especially because they didn't see the good in him when he was still injured and malnourished. Compared to these girls, even Martina is much better. Despite Daphne's unwelcoming attitude, the girls shamelessly tagged along while giggling. We have stealth subterfuge and combat training today. I wonder what will happen, said Mandy Brocklehurst. Axel frowned. He doesn't like to be surrounded in a group, especially since he doesn't know everyone in the group. The girls would ask him questions from time to time but Axel would either ignore them or respond perfunctorily. Since they were Daphne's friends, he just let her handle them. When they reached the class, everyone was surprised. Since the size of Hogwarts classrooms can be adjusted, the space of the class had been extended by a lot for some reason. There were different targets and training dummies stationed at different distances. The tables and benches had been shifted to the side and weapons of all kinds were laid across them, creating quite the intimidating scene. Looking at those sharp and pointy weapons, Axel's first thought was, what would happen if he were to use a Punio Totalis here? The spell that lets him control multiple objects at the same time. With so many sharp and dangerous weapons, the classroom would turn into a meat grinder, wouldn't it? Damn my intrusive thoughts. He thought, mentally giving himself a slap. Clearing his head of the messy thoughts, he looked at the man waiting for them near the front who must be their professor. He was a man who looked to be in his 50s. He had graying hair but a fit and muscular body and the side of his chin had a cross-shaped scar. He had a few students of Mahudakoro standing on his side as well. Welcome, everyone. I'm Sensei Morg and I'll be in charge of your combat training, he said in a deep and solemn voice. Combat is an essential part of being a ninja. Most of our missions put us in a situation where we have to fight, whether it is to attack our enemies or to defend our clients. In this class, I'll be teaching you how you can use your body and weapons for doing that, he said, pointing at one particularly long table. We'll start with kunai. They are on that table. Kunai are multifunctional weapons. They can be used as throwing weapons for long-range attacks, they can be used in short range for hand-to-hand combat, they're also useful if you need to cut any objects like ropes or gouge holes, there's a hole in its back where you can tie a rope, further branching out its uses. That's why, a kunai is a basic weapon that every ninja carries and learns to wield. Pick out your kunais from the table. We'll start with long-range training. Blimey, a simple object has so many uses, commented Mandy Brocklehurst, examining the kunai in her hand. What are we supposed to do with this? Asked Padma, picking up her own. Axel picked one up as well as he weighed it in hands and examined it. As expected, the edges were blunted with magic so that the students don't hurt each other or themselves. Sensei Morg pointed at the target circles stationed in front of them. You're supposed to hit them. Improve your aim first. Really? Just like that. It's on. Students found the prospect of throwing kunais enjoyable, so everyone got right to it. But, they quickly realized it wasn't going to be as easy as they thought. Out of all the kunais thrown in the beginning, very few were able to actually reach the target, let alone hit it. Lame. Let them show you how it's done, said Sensei Morg, gesturing to the students of Mahudakoro. The ninjas first demonstrated the technique and then made the throws. All of them were able to hit the bullseye. After that, they began to supervise the students so they don't accidentally hurt each other. While the others were busy throwing with all their might, Axel just stood and watched. He had to agree with Sensei Morg, everyone was lame. Even the students of Mahudakoro. He could hit the bullseye at this range even in crippled state. This throwing training was useless to him. None of the girls around Axel were able to reach the target, let alone the bullseye. But they were quite eager to see Axel try. I can't reach it. But, I think Axel can make it, said Mandy Brocklehurst, feeling up the muscles on Axel's arm which were hidden under the cloak. Whoa, what have you been hiding here? You shouldn't do that when I have a weapon in my hand, said Axel as she shook off her hand, barely resisting the urge to bash her face in. Even though the threat was real, only Daphne out of the girls realized that he wasn't kidding. Following Mandy, the other girls also touched Axel's arms. Wow! This is so hard. It's like rock. But not even a second later, they were all shoved away, not by Axel but by Daphne, even before Axel extracted himself. You all, stay away from him. She said in a scathing tone, trying to keep her voice quiet, but a student from Mahudakoro still warned them to not cause a commotion. The girls were a bit scared for a moment since they could feel the danger coming from Daphne this time. But then they thought it must be their imagination as they began whispering among themselves about Axel's looks. Only Axel, who knew her better, could tell that something was wrong with her. Even though I always wanted to do that, these bitches, there are so many sharp weapons here. She kept murmuring some strange things in a low voice and her eyes couldn't be seen due to her hair. Hey, said Axel, shaking her little. Are you all right? With a jerk, Daphne seemed to come to her senses as she looked at Axel. Yeah. I'm fine. It's just that these girls are too infuriating, she said, not trying to prevent her voice to be heard by her friends. Though even now, the girls didn't take her seriously. All right, we won't bother you if you can hit the target next time, said Mandy Brocklehurst. Yeah, we can do that. The other girls agreed as well. But of course, they knew that there was no chance her kunai would even reach the target, let alone hit it. Daphne coldly glared at the girls. Fine. She said, picking up a kunai with a grim determination rarely seen in her. Axel looked at her in surprise. Her previous attempts weren't bad, but there was no power in her throws. He was sure she wouldn't be able to reach it. But Daphne seemed determined, and pissed as she clutched the kunai tightly. After aiming for a while, she swung her hand with all her might. Shin, the kunai actually made a sound as it cut through the air, surprising Axel. This was a very strong throw. Strong enough that it would easily reach the target, proving everyone wrong. Though, Axel could also tell that her aim this time was off the mark. It wouldn't hit the target. The kunai in Axel's hand disappeared. Shin Ding, the spinning kunai, traveled in a curved path as it hit Daphne's kunai. Thump thump, they were too annoying after all, thought Axel, looking at the two kunai buried in the bullseye as he ignored the shocked reactions of everyone else. He was fine with just Daphne's company for the time being. For the stealth class, their teacher was a woman with braided black hair, wearing black lipstick and black outfit. Even her nails were painted black. I'm Kurai. Welcome to your stealth and concealment training. Even her name, Kurai, translates into dark. You all might have heard that ninjas are also called shinobis, and the underlying connotation of the word shinobi is to hide and, by extension, to forbear, hence its association with stealth and invisibility, she explained smoothly. So, stealth and subterfuge are an absolute must for any shinobi. It's the main reason why ninjas are hired. It's useful for spying and reconnaissance, assassination, concealment, disguise, and so on. Damn, this woman doesn't censor her words, thought Axel, looking at some of the students who seemed a bit terrified due to the mention of things like assassination. It has to be mentioned that ninjas don't accept just any assassination request, and not every ninja is given the authority to accept assassination missions. Officially, only the Hunter.Nin Corps are given such missions, and few people have the authority to move them. Unbothered, Kurai-sensei continued, let's start with stealth. Stealth doesn't simply mean invisibility. It involves everything you can do to make sure that no one notices what you're doing. Saying so, Kurai-sensei snapped her fingers. In the next second, a kunai was buried above the head of a student, Neville Longbottom, who promptly dropped to his knees with a terrified expression. Did anyone see me throw that? This is stealth. She's good, thought Axel. Too bad there was little she could teach him that he didn't already know. And the things he might not know are so advanced that they won't be taught in the first class. For the rest of the class, Axel simply kept a low profile. Since he was the best at stealth, it was that much more important to keep it hidden from the students. It's a skill that loses its usefulness the more you advertise it. The class passed peacefully. But, at the end of the class, hey, you. Kurai-sensei called out, making Axel stop. He looked back to see who was being called, only to see Kurai-sensei's gaze fixed on him. The fuck? Yes, you, the cute one. You wait for a while. We need to have a talk. Damn it, this time I didn't do anything. Axel swore inwardly. What the heck? He had gone out of his way not to attract attention in this class, and this sensei is just destroying all of his efforts. Next. New skills, Mysterious Martina. Next. The Chamber of Secrets POWSTONES. If you want to read ahead and support me. Patreon.com/snollygoster. Thanks for your support. Chapter 65. New skills, Mysterious Martina. You are listening at novelfull.audio. In the quiet classroom, Axel faced the woman in black. He wasn't sure why this woman would want him to wait despite him actively avoiding her attention. Kurai-sensei looked at Axel with a penetrating look. How peculiar, she muttered. Axel's expression still didn't change, but he couldn't help but ask, what might sensei be talking about? You have a talent for stealth. Tell me, handsome boy, is it natural or did you learn it? Axel cursed inwardly. How did she know? She hadn't even looked at him throughout the class. He made an expression of confusion as he spoke. I have a talent for stealth. Sensei, why would you think that? The woman chuckled. Well, first of all, your appearance is too eye-catching. And yet, my notice kept slipping off you. But when I rewind my memory, I can clearly recall seeing you standing there. Fuck. Axel understood what had happened even before the sensei concluded her words. As an experienced thief, stealth is now a second nature to him. The most important thing for a thief is to not get noticed, and he has become overly adept at it. So much so that his stealth can be activated at a subconscious level. Earlier, he just wanted to keep a low profile and he must have subconsciously used his stealth skills. But still, to be able to deduce his talent, this woman is capable, otherwise, the other professors would have called him out long ago since this is not the first time he has subconsciously used his stealth. It's a habit from a distant past. Kurai-sensei continued, since I have the memory of you being there but I didn't notice you, your presence must be quite low. But that's not the only point. The way you walk, the way you move, the way you breathe, everything is done in a way that's perfect for stealth. This is not a common occurrence. It's the kind of stealth talent every ninja desires. So I was curious how you were able to do this. Her excitement kept increasing as she spoke. Damn. Axel didn't know so much could be interpreted from his simple actions. So that's why she asked if he did it on his own or if someone taught him. Axel didn't want anyone to know he was an expert at stealth, so he quickly thought of an explanation. Putting on a moderate look of surprise and realization, he spoke, is that what it is? No wonder, he shook his head as his hand touched the scar on his cheek. Actually, there are a lot of times I've been forced to avoid being noticed. Maybe that's why it's like this, he said with a helpless smile. From what he could remember, the small bit he had unintentionally showed should be around 0.1% of his real skills, so, it should be passed off as just talent. Kurai-sensei looked at the light and faded scars on his cheek and left eye and imagined his circumstances. Her gaze turned somewhat sympathetic. If it's like that, then I can understand. But it's a waste of your talent to study along with others. Tell me, would you like me to arrange private lessons for you? She asked with a smile, expecting him to be overjoyed. But Axel could only sigh inwardly. If it was something else, he might have given it some thought. But, stealth was already his forte. He didn't think this sense could teach him some worth risking exposing his skills over. Of course, he didn't think his lie just was enough to convince her. It's better to avoid her as much as possible. So, there was no way he was going to accept. But, rejecting would be even more suspicious. I'll see if I have the time. He pretended to be ignorant of the benefit stealth could give him. Kurai-sensei looked a bit disappointed and irritated. How would it feel when you offer a muggle a 10,000 galleons but the other party thinks it's a worthless currency, and accepts the money as if he's doing you a favor? That's how she must have felt. Such an ignorant person, would you still want to give him the galleons? After coming out of the classroom, Axel sighed. He felt bad for rejecting the offer but accepting it would have brought more harm than good. What was it about this time? Asked Daphne, who was waiting for him again. Axel shrugged, she said I was too eye-catching and handsome. Well, he did tell her the truth. Axel ignored her surprised reaction. It wasn't a big deal. Anyways, I have herbology now, what do you have? Before Daphne could ask more on the topic, Axel simply moved on. Ah. I have charms now. Well, you are already late because of me. You should go now. Separating from Daphne, Axel went to the herbology class. But, he later came to regret going there. Since he was late, everyone had arrived and the class had already started. As soon as he reached the greenhouse, he saw a bunch of potted plants on the table and all of the students were wearing something on their ears. Just as he was wondering why they'd need earmuffs, out of nowhere, a sharp noise pierced his ears, almost bursting his eardrums. Fuck. Mandrake. Listening to that noise, a thought flashed through his mind before it went a chaotic state. His knees buckled as he fell to the ground. He wasn't too shabby at herbology since it was Daphne's specialty. So, he knew a bit about mandrakes. Too bad it wasn't to the point he could have grasped the situation in time. He had misophonia, a disorder that causes excessive irritation and discomfort towards particular sounds. His misophonia isn't too troublesome, just kicking in when he hears particularly loud and shrill noise, like the sound of a train. And every time, the situation is not too bad. He's able to manage without showing much external reaction. But this time, it was a mandrake's cry. It's enough to knock out a normal person. And on Axel, who has misophonia, it's like pouring oil into the fire. The noise caused him such intense irritation and discomfort that he wanted to destroy everything. His magic flared up, about to destroy everything that was the reason for this noise. And with the last bit of coherent thought, he realized this could be a problem. Thus, he chose to not resist passing out. Just when Axel's magic had erupted, the students and Professor Sprout suddenly had a dreadful feeling, but before anything could happen though, it stopped. No one knew where it came from. Axel woke up to a gentle sensation on his hand and forehead. It was strangely soothing, and it calmed down his mind, which was still quite chaotic. He was able to squash down his destructive impulse and recall what had happened. He had been about to go berserk due to that extreme noise. And in order to stop himself, he had decided to let the sound knock him out. He could have resisted it, of course, but then he might have done something violent instead. And now that he was half awake and half asleep, this warmth on his forehead was able to bring him back to consciousness. Axel felt that this foreign sensation was not bad. He wondered if he'll be able to feel this more often if he got knocked out by Mandrake's cry again. Though as he stirred, and opened his eyes, the sensation was quickly gone, making him wonder if he had been dreaming. "You're awake." Axel's eyes quickly scanned his surroundings as he sat with vigilance. He found out that he was in the hospital wing and the voice just now belonged to Daphne, who was sitting on his bedside. "How long was I out?" Daphne's lips were curved downward. "Only an hour," she said, as if she was displeased that he woke up. Axel frowned. "That's a lot," he murmured. He should have woken up sooner. "Though, why are you here?" "Susan told me." "Oh. That nosy girl." His herbology was together with Hufflepuff's. The news must have spread everywhere. He muttered with some irritation. Daphne patted his shoulder. "Don't worry. You aren't the only one. A few students from every class have passed out due to mandrakes. Unlike you, who didn't have any protection, they passed out because they didn't put their earmuffs right. Neville was one of them." Well, that did make him feel better. But still, he decided to do something about this misophonia soon. It's a glaring weakness. Along with that, he also had to make preparations against the organization. Later that night, in the training room of his secret hideout, Axel opened the system interface. His main focus right now was preparing for the organization's attack. After all, once he starts drawing attention, there's no telling when they'll come or how they'll come. It's better to prepare first. That's why, that night, he bought some new skills from the system. How did he get the SP for that? Well, as mentioned, SP can be obtained by stealing. The bigger and more daring the heist, the more SP he'll get. And at the end of last term, he stole a very valuable replica of the Philosopher's Stone, from right under Dumbledore and Voldemort's noses. Correction. Only one of them has a nose, but you get the point. After that heist, the SP he got was amazing and he hadn't spent it yet since he wanted to save it for the time of need. And that turned out to be a great decision since the skills he needs now, after the change of his plans, are much different than the skills he would have bought earlier. The first skill, Super Sense. Develop the ability to sense a certain amount of area around you. This skill is absolutely necessary for his preparations. His enemies won't send out an invitation before attacking, and he doesn't want to be caught off guard. This skill can let him detect danger. Thus, this skill is going to have to be active for most of the time this year. The next skill, Heal, Arcane Thief, is not a class that specializes in healing, so it wasn't powerful. But a healing skill was absolutely necessary, so it'll do. As for the last skill, it took almost all of his SP, but he still bought it. Void Travel, as explained, he puts his safety first, and this is like an emergency escape. There is already Apparition, a way of teleportation for wizards, but the thing about Apparition is, it can be easily blocked. It's useless at Hogwarts. In fact, after the rapid development in the last decade, anti-apparition wards can be found at just any property. That's why he chose this skill. Once he gains some proficiency in these skills, his safety would be increased by a lot, which is something that is very welcome at this time when he is doing something as reckless as being the bait for the enemy. With his paranoid and cautious nature, even his risks are filled with caution. Let's see what these skills are about, he murmured as he began his practice. Just like that, a few days passed. During this time, Axel was very busy with his training. He didn't do anything too eye-catching and only practiced the new skills even during the classes since he didn't have much to do. To practice Super Sense, he had to increase his spatial awareness. The beginning stages included meditation exercises and going through obstacles with his eyes closed. He'd wander out at night and go through the corridors sensing his surroundings. He tied up logs in his room. After swinging them, he'd have to try to sense and dodge them with his eyes closed. After getting bruised up with that, he'd practice Heal on his wounds. Heal wasn't too difficult, though the same couldn't be said about Void Travel. He hadn't made much progress in that yet. No progress was on the ninjutsu front as well. Akiko still hadn't healed yet. She stayed in one of the private wards in the infirmary and visits were not allowed for her, so he couldn't visit her and start learning from her. Axel found it a bit overprotective, but considering that she was such a genius, it might not be too implausible to give her such treatment. His days passed like this, relatively uneventful. Though, one day, something happened. Just like the past few days, he was wandering around the corridors at night to train his super sense. His stealth skills were active so that no one could find him as he walked through with his eyes closed, only relying on his other senses. During these days, since his eyes were closed during the training, his other senses had amplified. And maybe that's why, but as he walked, he suddenly detected a faint whiff of fragrance in the air. This faint scent of lavender, he was quite familiar with it. His eyes opened, though he didn't find anyone. His eyes opened, and of course, he didn't find anyone. But, when he activated his arcane eyes, he found the silhouette of a girl passing by the corridor ahead. Martina, what is she up to? Martina had always been quite the mystery girl. This wasn't the first time he was encountering her at night. Their very first encounter was on his first night at Hogwarts, when he was wandering around, searching for a place to spend the night. Though this time, the situation is quite different. He wasn't talking about his difference, but Martina's. She had on some strange goggles on her eyes, the cloak she was wearing radiated dense magic, and in her hand, was a staff that glowed so bright that it made his arcane eyes cringe. What the heck is up with this girl? There was no way he wasn't curious. So, he began following her to see where she'd go. Axel followed her for a while, and when she reached her destination, he certainly received a big surprise. Bathroom. He thought with absurdity as he saw her entering the second-floor out-of-order bathroom like she was going to war. Who the fuck goes to bathroom dressed like that? Bonus scene, Hogwarts Infirmary, private ward. Usually, this place is reserved for patients who need critical treatment or isolation, but this time, a girl whose condition was not so critical was staying here. Akiko Matsushima looked outside the window, lost in thought. She had always thought that she was the best genius out there. In the same generation, she hadn't met anyone who could even come close to her level. Putting her absurd talent aside, she had received the best education and instructions from the very beginning, and she had always put her all into training, unlike other geniuses who slack off. Her target was at a level others wouldn't even dream of achieving. And yet, despite all this, there was one person who could actually beat her while holding back. And the most absurd thing. He was around 5 years younger than her. Someone who could reach this level at the age of 12. This is simply out of the boundaries of comprehension. And, such a genius was completely unrecognized here. She recalled the seal of secrecy she had signed with him. It's not the school's fault. This genius is intentionally hiding himself among these ordinary students, hiding his abilities. Every morning, she'd see him go to the Forbidden Forest for serious training. And then he'd come back and hold back in the physical training classes. He probably holds back like this in all of his other classes as well, or just his stealth would have been enough to put the whole Mahudakoro to shame, she thought, recalling the time he stopped holding back. Despite her training, she couldn't sense anything. She couldn't help but wonder how he was so strong, what drove him to obtain such power, and what was his ultimate target. That even after having this strength, he doesn't show his real abilities. As she was lost in her thoughts, there was a knock on her door. A few seconds later, Yamasaki Hiroshi, the principal of Mahudakoro himself, entered the room. "How are you?" Even after such a distinguished person personally paid her a visit, Akiko simply ignored him as she continued her training. Yamasaki Hiroshi, who had been out of Hogwarts for the past few days, seriously checked Akiko's condition. After he was done, he smiled faintly. "What drove you to such lengths, that you used that technique, my granddaughter?" Even if Akiko wasn't under the secrecy contract, she'd still not tell him. "I was just training." In face of his rebellious granddaughter, Yamasaki simply sighed helplessly. Her mother was also rebellious when she was young, marrying that Matsushima clan brat. Yamasaki patted his granddaughter's head. "Aki, don't push yourself so hard. Revenge is not the way." Akiko rolled her eyes in a here.we.go.again look. "Save it, grandfather. I'm an adult now. I will do whatever I want, and if you can't help me, then I'll find others who can." And Martina is going to the bathroom dressed like that, why? And Akiko is going to need help with her revenge. Power Stones. The Chamber of Secrets next Tilta. Snake hunting. If you want to read ahead, consider joining Patreon, it'll help me out big time. Patreon.com/snollygoster. Thanks for all the support and keep coming back. Chapter 66. The Chamber Secrets. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 66. Martina had been in quite an internal conflict these days. So far, her life in this world has been very peaceful and fulfilling. She has quite a loving and caring family, and magic has been such an entertaining factor that she can keep researching it all her life. But, it can't be forgotten that this world isn't exactly as safe a place as it appears. It's the Potterverse, where, even though there's no Harry Potter, there is still Voldemort. She confirmed it herself last year. And even though the canon plot is not the same, some factors still have not changed. For example, last year, even with so many things changing, Voldemort still came after the stone and ended up endangering the lives of the students. So, this year, however unlikely it may seem, there is a chance that the Chamber of Secrets might be opened, and a basilisk might start to roam free in Hogwarts. Heck, it might have already been opened for all she knew. Thus, as someone who knows the plot, she has been agonizing over what to do. In the original story, it was only through sheer luck that no one died in the second year. Somehow, every time someone saw the basilisk, it was through some sort of reflection, and no direct eye contact was made, thus only resulting in the victim's petrification, and the basilisk didn't attack directly as well, or it could have simply eaten a few students. But now, after everything has changed, would such lucky coincidences still occur? She can't take such a chance. After all, a lot is at stake here. A basilisk is actually a big deal. It's one of the most dangerous XXXXX creatures. If someone is actually killed by it, the influential families from all over the world, whose precious children are studying here, would be beyond outraged. Especially since there has already been a troll incident before. They would politically tear down the school, and her parents would be leading the charge. Not to mention that the cooperation with Mahudakoro might end, leaving her research of her magic incomplete. Thus, the basilisk needs to be taken care of, as soon as possible. Martina had already made preparations for this years ago, but now that she was actually going to do this, she was having second thoughts. It was a basilisk. And this wasn't some fantasy. It's easy to think about it, but it's much more difficult to actually do it in real life. One wrong move could cost her life. But Martina had already made up her mind. If a 12-year-old boy with little to no magical training can do it, then why can't I, a reincarnator with so many cheats, do it? I even have the linguist skill, so Parseltum won't be a problem, she thought positively. As a reincarnator with high karma, she had been able to get a few cheats with her reincarnation, one of which was linguist. It basically makes her adept in all languages of this world. That includes magical and runic languages. So, she can access the chamber without needing a Parselmouth as help and actually communicate with the basilisk, since it's not under the control of the diary Voldemort yet. Maybe, just maybe, things could be settled peacefully, and if not, then she has made so many preparations as well. For basilisk venom, she had some phoenix tears. In fact, her parents have always had her carry some with her for use in case she even gets a scratch. For its deathly gaze, she has prepared special goggles that'll protect her eyes. For her body, she was wearing an enchanted cloak which has many enchantments, and her staff, it's something that has a much better magical conductivity than wands. And lastly, she has even brought with her a flock of roosters, whose cry are the only weakness of basilisks. Yes, with this much, I can do it. She thought, trying to push down her nervousness. Besides, she also wants to explore the Chamber of Secrets. She should explore it before the plot starts. Looking at Martina going into the bathroom, Axel frowned. As far as he knew, this bathroom was out of order. And on her way here, she had already passed by another girl's bathroom which was perfectly in order. Coupled with other circumstances like her unusual attire, demeanor, and time, she's likely not using the bathroom for its intended use. Then, what's going on? All sorts of reasons came into his head. Though at this moment, something happened. Ding, special quest triggered, snake hunting. Get rid of the basilisk. Reward. Axel was pleasantly surprised to see the notification. After all, special quests have always given him good rewards. He got the light magic infusion and light armor skills from special quests, both of which have proven to be quite useful. He readily accepted the quest. So, what's this basilisk and where is it? He asked the system. As a person who just got acquainted with the wizarding world, he of course had no idea what the fuck a basilisk was. But he figured it was just a creature that somehow got into Hogwarts like the troll. It wasn't until the system gave him the information on the basilisk did he realized, this might be a scam. The basilisk, known also as the King of Serpents, is a dark creature which may reach gigantic sizes, and live many hundreds of years. It's highly resistant to magic, except light magic, and highly venomous. It has a murderous stare, and the beam of its eyes can be fatal. Young basilisks are weak to rooster's cry, but its effect diminishes with the basilisk's age. The size of the basilisk can go up to 50 meters. Going through the information, Axel realized that he might have bitten more than he can chew this time. He was particularly intimidated by the death stare skill. This thing can kill with just eye contact. How crazy is that? System, how am I supposed to handle the death stare? He asked the system incredulously. If not for that skill, he could have still managed, but if he's going to die even if he made a direct eye contact by accident, then it's too risky. Axel, death stare is not an absolute skill. There are ways it can be avoided. If you just close your eyes, it can't affect you. Then how the fuck am I supposed to fight? System. Arcane eyes, damn. The venom, he began. Leftover phoenix tears. Fuck. Sigh. No excuses then. It would seem that he has some snake hunting to do. Entering the bathroom, Martina went straight to the sink with the small serpent. Dollar, open, dollar, she said, and the old mechanism came to life as the sink sank out of sight. I don't want to do this, murmured Martina, looking into the wide aperture that appeared in front of her. Her feet left the ground as she started to float in the air without the help of any broomstick. She then flew into the huge aperture, the long tresses of her purple hair fluttering behind her. Crunch crunch, when she reached the bottom of the tunnel and landed on the ground, the crunching of bones beneath her feet creeped her out. She tried to ignore the huge snake skin that was lying not far away from her. Looking at it only made her determination waver. Walking into the passageway for a while, she came across another door. It had 2 stone serpents entwined carved on it, their eyes set with great, glinting emeralds. Dollar, open, dollar, spoke Martina once again in a low, faint hiss. The serpents parted as the wall cracked open, and Martina, shaking slightly due to nervousness and anticipation, walked inside. This was it. This was the legendary Chamber of Secrets, built by Salazar Slytherin. This place has such a high archaeological value, and they were never explored further in the books. It's called the Chamber of Secrets, surely it should contain some other secrets as well apart from a giant basilisk, right? Stepping past the parted walls, she entered the dimly lit chamber. From what she could see, it was a huge area, at least 2 football fields. Towering stone pillars entwined with life-like carvings of giant serpents rose to support a ceiling lost in darkness, casting long, black shadows through the odd greenish gloom that filled the place. A stone pathway, wide enough for 2 cars to pass side by side, led to the wide expanse further into the chamber, which had the giant statue of Salazar Slytherin. Greenish water surrounded either sides of the pathway which she walked on, as she fixed her attention on the giant statue with some anxiety, specifically, its mouth. That was the area which is supposed to open and free the basilisk. Thankfully, it was closed. Sighing in relief, Martina decided not to open it yet. She will make all the preparations before she makes her move. While she was walking on the long pathway, her attention was diverted due to the amazing architecture of the Chamber of Secrets. She was itching to explore the wards and enchantments placed around this place. That's why, she was taken completely by surprise when something grabbed her hand from behind and attempted to drag her back forcefully. Martina screamed as her magic lashed out at whatever was trying to pull her. What the fuck? For fuck's sake, don't cause a commotion and quickly come. A low voice came from right in front of her, making her freak out of even more. How can someone else be in the Chamber of Secrets? And, why does this voice sound a bit familiar? Instead of going towards the voice, Martina instead began backing away as she raised her voice. Why don't come near me. I know very pwr magic. She yelled, raising her staff in front of her as a magical shield was raised around her. There were more curses from the other side. Dumb bish is going to get me killed as well, muttered the voice in frustration as a person suddenly became visible, making Martina widen her eyes in shock. Axel. Axel was stealthily following Martina into the chamber while gathering more information from the system. It seems the basilisk is inside a secret chamber of Salazar Slytherin. Thank God it's not roaming around freely like the troll, and Martina is going to hunt it down. Well, she does seem well prepared about the task and she's a powerful genius. So, Axel figured he would just watch from the sidelines and help out in case of emergency and claim the rewards afterwards. After all, the system only asked him to get rid of the basilisk. He doesn't need to do everything by himself. Thus, closing his eyes and activating his arcane eyes, Axel followed Martina, using her as a testing rat for traps and attacks. And as expected, Martina seemed to know her stuff, since while Axel was constantly on edge, trying to search for the basilisk in the shadows, while Martina was navigating the place familiarly and wasn't even surprised by the life-like statues and basilisk skin. As expected, this girl is on a different league, thought Axel as he looked at Martina, who was walking along the pathway without triggering a single trap, with some respect. She even had the time to admire the scenery while he worked hard to step on the exact steps she had taken. He had a headache just thinking about coming all the way here while checking for traps and wards by himself, especially since the wards of this place were quite complicated when he once increased the intensity of his arcane eyes and caught a glimpse of them. Meanwhile, the unaware Martina, who just didn't bother about that stuff due to her reliance on canon knowledge and lack of practical experience. Transmigrators. While walking along the pathway, Axel realized that the woman had completely ignored the seemingly deep water that was surrounding them from both sides, just like how she had ignored countless traces of the basilisk's existence around them. A doubt came into Axel's mind. Does this girl really know what she's doing? If the basilisk is not in that water, then where is it? Not trusting her, Axel increased the intensity of his arcane eyes as he peered into the waters on either side of them. Fuck. His heartbeat accelerated as he saw a giant shadow faintly glowing at the depths of the water through his X-ray vision granted by his arcane eyes. It's huge, he thought, looking at Salazar's snake. And it was getting bigger and bigger. Axel looked back at Martina and still found no reaction from her. The huge serpent was coming closer to the surface. It was moving very slowly, as if to not make any disturbance in the water. Even if she's using herself as a bait, this should be enough, right? He thought, as he still saw no magical fluctuations coming from Martina, neither did he see her put up her guard or set up a trap. His suspicions of her kept increasing as time ticked by. A few seconds later. If she's still intentionally not doing anything, then I really admire her patience and balls, he thought as the shadow of the snake was even closer to the surface. It seemed like it would reach the surface very soon. A few seconds later. System, she has no idea, does she? No, fucking hell, he muttered as he hurriedly tried to pull her back. Why did he not run away at this moment? Because of the thing called life debt. This girl had saved his life when he was attacked by dementors on the previous Halloween. Now, he can't just let her die, can he? That's why, Axel tried to pull her away. But, Martina had the leisure to scream like a little girl and even lash out at him with her magic. Curses flew out of Axel's mouth as he realized that the snake was now just beneath the surface, waiting for the right moment to pounce on them. He tried to persuade her to come quickly, but Martina still didn't seem aware of the danger. Why don't come near me. I know V. Very powerful magic. She yelled, backing away from him and going even closer to the basilisk. Damn it. In his frustration, Axel cancelled his stealth as he quickly pointed at the water body beside her. There's a basilisk down there. He thought this would be enough to make her prepare her overpowered magic and also back away, but it would seem that he had overestimated her intelligence. Martina looked alarmed, but also confused. No, the basilisk is obviously inside the statue. Boom! At this moment, with a huge splash, something huge broke through the surface, coming straight towards them with a surprising agility. Snake hunting. Power stones. Can't wait. Come read ahead on Patreon. Patreon.com/snollygoster. Track the progress of at my Discord channel. Chapter 67. Snake hunting. You are listening at Novel Full.audio. Chapter 67. Upon encountering Axel in the middle of Chamber of Secrets, Martina was actually more surprised than she was at the prospect of encountering a ghost here, which was her earlier assumption. Seriously, what is he doing here? And how did he get here? Has he always been here, or did he somehow follow her? Did he come here because he's under the control of Diary? All sorts of questions flashed inside her head. But, before she could get her answers, Axel shouted that there was a basilisk behind her. At first, Martina couldn't understand. Shouldn't the basilisk be inside the statue? It won't come until she opens the statue. It was only then did it click to her. She had assumed that the basilisk would be trapped behind the statue. But, why did she automatically assume that? If you actually think about it, can such a big snake stay alive locked up in a statue for years? Fat chance. It would have made more sense for it to actually reside in the water here. But, she had been so caught up in her thoughts that she didn't pay attention to this detail. All this was too much for her to process at once. And by the time she realized, it was already too late. With a loud splash, something huge broke through the surface, coming straight towards them with a surprising quickness. Boom! Within the blink of an eye, Martina and Axel both disappeared as the mouth of the giant creature, filled with sharp fangs, closed around them. Everything happened so quickly that Martina couldn't even react. Her breathing stopped as she saw her life flash before her eyes. In the next moment, a strong force enveloped her and she found herself being moved at an astonishing speed. When she came to, she realized that in the blink of an eye, Axel had moved the both of them a few meters away from where they were standing a moment ago. The stone pavement behind them still contained a streak of magic due to his footwork. Cold shivers ran down Martina's spine when she realized that she would have been swallowed just now. Hisses. SSSSS, prey is fleeing. I want blood. The snake's loud hissing reverberated in her ears, making her shake. She could feel its sinister and bloodthirsty nature. She had thought that the serpent might have been like that only due to Voldemort's control and hunger. That's why she had brought a lot of food for it. But right now, after feeling the malice and sadism in its voice, she was certain that things could not be settled just by talking. It wasn't attacking them because it was hungry. It was attacking them because it wanted to kill. Run. A voice spoke into her ear before she was unceremoniously dumped on the ground. Axel couldn't be bothered to pay attention to this mafia princess right now. Even though he had successfully saved Martina, his work here had just started. And only after seeing the creature up close did he realize that, it wasn't going to be easy. The serpent was ginormous, its vivid green scales looking impenetrable. And despite its size, it was moving with surprising agility. But of course, Axel was still faster. Arcane eyes, arcane footwork, knife wielding, light magic infusion. Right after its ambush failed, Axel didn't give the serpent the time to turn around. With a streak of light, he appeared on top of the creature. The knife in his hand glowed with a golden magic and his knife-wielding skills, which had even defeated Akiko, showed its charm once again as dozens of cuts appeared on the giant serpent's back. SSSSSS hisses, the snake hissed in pain, but unfortunately, Axel only had a knife in his hand, not a sword. It couldn't even reach deep enough to pierce through its thick scales. Meanwhile, lying on the ground, as she witnessed this scene, Martina felt a strong feeling of déjà vu. But right now, she was so surprised with Axel's skills and so scared of the basilisk that she couldn't remember where she'd witnessed something similar. Her mind wasn't working properly right now and her hands and feet were shaking. Scrambling to her feet, she quickly took out another pair of goggles similar to the ones she was wearing and sent them to Axel. Axel. Wear them quickly. They'll protect you from the basilisk's eyes. She called out in a fluster as she attacked the basilisk with a few powerful spells. Due to her shaking hands, some of her spells hit the basilisk in the face while the others missed, but since she was so distracted, they didn't come out as powerful as she intended them to be. They ended up only annoying the magic-resistant snake and drawing its attention. Shit. As he wore the useless goggles she had sent him, Axel cursed as he saw the basilisk once again heading in Martina's direction. He hoped that this girl had some powerful weapon ready to attack the basilisk or she was at least prepared to run. Martina did have a powerful weapon for this occasion. And when the snake swerved around to come for her, she had no choice but to use it. I'm sorry, Basilisk. But it seems that there's no other choice, she thought regretfully. Taking out a box from her pouch, she threw it at the basilisk. Instantly, a dozen of roosters came out, along with a sound-amplifying magical device. Cock-da-da-doodle-do. The loud sound of the rooster's cry reverberated throughout the chamber, drowning all other noise for a moment. Dollar hisses. Dollar, annoying. What? Martina had thought that this should do the trick, but surprisingly, the loud sound of the rooster's cry didn't seem to cause much damage to the basilisk. It only made the tense situation comical as the basilisk ignored the roosters and fixed its enraged gaze on her. Martina couldn't understand it. She had clearly read in the books that the basilisks were weak to roosters' cry. Even in canon, Tom Riddle's diary had gotten rid of all the roosters in the second year. That must mean something, right? Or why would he do that? Wait a moment. Martina only then realized. Tom Riddle in the diary was just a 16-year-old. Chances are, he never actually tested the rooster's cry on the basilisk and only read it in the same books Martina had read. And this information mustn't be totally accurate. But it was too late to realize this now. The basilisk was already coming for her with its scary eyes fixed on her. At this moment, she happened to make eye contact with the serpent for the very first time. Its large yellow eyes filled with viciousness were fixed directly on her as it slithered towards her with great momentum. Looking into its eyes, Martina felt fear gripping her heart. The glasses did protect her as she was still alive, and she could still move as well. But, she was too scared to take action. Her magic was only powerful when her mental state was stable. But right now, her mental state was all but stable. Nothing was going according to the plan. Plus, she was too damn scared. In her previous life, she had been an ordinary girl who would be scared by cockroaches, okay. Even though she was powerful right now and had a clemency, it seems that a 1,000-year-old basilisk is still out of her mental capacity. Looking at the cowardly girl about to be devoured, Axel clicked his tongue. Did she really think it would work? He thought in exasperation. He was thinking of taking it easy, but it looks like he'll now have to take things a bit more seriously. His eyes glowed brighter and he searched for the best spots to attack on the serpent's body. Then, increasing the output of his skills, he rushed forward, running along the serpent's back. Before the snake reached Sakura Martina, Axel had arrived in front of the useless girl with a gust of wind that blew her hair back, standing between her and the snake. Run! This is the last time. He said in warning. He figured his life debt should be over by this much. Now he won't go out of his way to save her. His life is also in danger right now. Throwing those words, he rushed towards the incoming snake with all his might. In the Chamber of Secrets, amidst the towering pillars, a boy and a basilisk charged at each other, each unafraid of another. Dollar hisses. Dollar, let's see what you've got, you worm, muttered Axel as he overclocked his skills to the max. The bones of his body made crackling sounds as he prepared to push his body to the limits. For some reason, he felt especially empowered right now. The glow of his knife intensified and the muscles of his hand that was holding the knife bulged. When they clashed, hundreds of cuts instantly appeared on the head of the creature. Dollar, sis. Dollar dark green blood splashed as the creature hissed in agony. In a few moments, both of its eyes were gone, and its skull had deep gashes, formed by repeated slashing of Axel's knife. It snapped at Axel, causing him stop his attack to dodge easily, but in that moment, the snake unexpectedly raised its body and plunged its head into the water as it started to flee. Fuck! I had almost reached the skull. Exclaimed Axel as he tried to stop it with no avail. On the other hand, after witnessing Axel's attack, that was much more powerful and faster than the previous one directly up front, Martina suddenly realized where she had seen it before. That Isn't that? Her mind quickly dug out the memory and her eyes widened in absolute shock. Last year on the third floor, during the confrontation against Voldemort, when the Lethifold had attacked Daphne, Martina was helpless to stop it. She had seen these same golden slashes appear all over the Lethifold. There was no way she could forget it because she had never known that it was possible to actually kill a Lethifold. It was such a groundbreaking discovery that she had researched about it for days but wasn't able to find anything. That's why, when she saw those golden lines cut into the basilisk's skin from close proximity, she quickly connected the dots. So, it was actually him all along. As she looked at Axel, who was currently fighting a basilisk single-handedly while moving at a speed difficult to follow, the boy her appeared to be covered in a veil of mysteries. Just like how she was fascinated with magic, similarly, the boy in front of her full of mysteries fascinated her. She has seen this boy fight a troll, dementors, a Lethifold, and now basilisk. And each time, the level of his magic keeps increasing. From the boy limping in pain through the corridor alone at night, to the powerful wizard fearlessly fighting a basilisk, she wanted to uncover the story behind this transformation. How? The look in Martina's eyes slowly changed. She now looked at him with the same desire that she showed for rare tomes of magic. It made the fear inside her dissipate, letting her achieve the stable mental state that is needed for her magic to work. In face of her passion, her fear would never win. It's my turn now, she thought, as her magic flared, making her robes flutter. Martina raised her staff, and thick purple chains of magic burst forth, wrapping themselves around the serpent. Her hair bellowed as the purple magic oozed out of her. And surprisingly, the chains were actually able to stop the basilisk from moving its body into the water. The intensity of her magic increased. And the chains actually started to retract slowly, pulling the giant creature along with them. Clack! That was the sound of Axel's jaw falling to the floor. He was ready to jump into the water and fight the creature underwater. Somehow, he felt that his chances underwater were not bad, especially since he felt additional power burning inside him at this moment. But, it would seem that there was no need to do that anymore. Looking at Martina bursting with magic, he only had one question. Woman, would it have killed you to use those powers earlier? Your daddy here had to fight at his max just now and even risk getting poisoned just now. Against its will, the thrashing serpent was brought out of the water as the chains tightly held it down on the ground. Not wanting to miss out on the chance, Axel used his arcane footwork to jump a few meters high. From that height, his knife hand stretched back completely while he infused as much light magic in the knife as he could. Knife throwing, then, he used his knife throwing skill. The real deal, not the small percentage he had used in the class. Boom! The knife he threw from his hand broke the sound barrier as it passed through the gap he'd created with his earlier slashes. $SSSS. It's pierced through the basilisk's skull, sealing its fate. The serpent gave out a few dying thrashes before it moved no more. Like this, the life of the 1,000-year-old basilisk came to an end. Congratulations! You have completed the special quest. Snake hunting. Rewards. Basilisk body parts. Special skill. Poison arts. Special skill. Poison immunity. Landing on the ground, Axel panted lightly as he sat on the ground. Even though the fight wasn't difficult, it wasn't easy either. Fortunately, the rewards were worth it. The new skills looked great. Poison, it was something he had been vulnerable against up until now. If anyone attacked him, whether it's up front or a sneak attack, he had made countermeasures. But, if someone attacked him using poison, Axel would have been helpless against it. It's actually good that he has been eating his own diet ingredients till now, or he'd have been poisoned by Damien Malcolm long ago. If the organization had decided to subdue him using a poison that spreads through the air, he would have been helpless as well. But now, he can learn about making poisons and even slowly develop his own poison immunity as well. So, overall, even though the mission had been risky, he'd say it was totally worth it. Sigh. Sitting on the ground, Axel sighed. He thought that it was time to relax, but then he remembered something. Glancing back, he saw Martina, who was currently looking at him in a daze. Fuck, I forgot. It would seem that the problem was still not over. Come sit, he said, beckoning her to sit on the ground beside him. He had a headache just thinking about what he was going to do now. Martina had seen too much. An flustered Martina, training with Akiko. Chapter 68. Flustered Martina and training with Akiko. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Martina looked at Axel, lost in thoughts. Her heart was still hammering in her chest due to the near-death encounter with the giant poisonous serpent just now, and she couldn't calm down at all. She had almost died. Twice. Just because she had gotten very powerful in this life, she had naively assumed that her fear would go away now. But, she had forgot to take into account that some fears are irrational. A tiny spider, or a cockroach, can't really hurt you. But don't most girls still hit the ceiling whenever they actually see one? The same thing happened to her when the basilisk suddenly attacked her. It was only thanks to this boy that she was alive right now. The scene of Axel hurling down the knife mid-air with skull-shattering force was still playing in her head. At this moment, Axel happened to look back at Martina. Come sit, he said calmly, beckoning her to sit on the ground beside him as his sight went back to the dead basilisk in front of him. He had a headache just thinking about what he was going to do now. She had seen too much. Martina looked at Axel in a daze. The way he was so calm in this situation gave her a sense of incongruency. Especially since she still couldn't even look at the creature's corpse without freaking out. So, the sight of Axel's small body casually sitting in front of the giant basilisk he killed just moments ago, looked oddly striking. Still in a haze of emotions, Martina found herself agreeing to his suggestion as she plopped herself on the ground beside him as she also turned to look at the basilisk. Somehow, after sitting beside him, she no longer felt so afraid. Her frantic mind slowly calmed down as the two of them just sat there on the cold stone ground, looking at their trophy. After a while, Axel turned to fix his gaze on her. You can't tell anyone about this. Martina flicked her hair to look at Axel in daze. This was the same boy who had made her trip on his first night at Hogwarts. In their second meeting, she had gotten a glimpse at some of his painful memories, making her traumatized by just witnessing them and wanting to know what led up to those memories and what happened next. Then the troll, Dementors, Lethifold. Looking back, Axel had always been mysterious. But the more she knows about him, the deeper the mysteries surrounding him become. But, he guards his secrets strongly. This was not the first time he was asking her to not tell anyone about his secrets. And every time she tries to know more about him, he always shuts her out. This time though, the things she has found out are too shocking. How is he doing the things he did? How and why did he sneak into the third-floor corridor that night? How did he appear here? How was he able to fight fearlessly against the basilisk? And most importantly, how is he so powerful? Martina had so many questions, and she badly wanted to know the answers. But, she knew that even if she asked, Axel wouldn't open up. So, she only nodded her head. Don't worry. I won't tell anyone, she said reassuringly. She'll save the questioning for later. Axel nodded, but still didn't look convinced. Would you sign a secrecy contract? Axel couldn't help but ask that. The things she had witnessed today were too big for him to risk it. Martina tried not to look hurt by that. Okay, I'll sign it if you want, she said. Though I thought we would have enough trust between us by now, she murmured in a lower voice. But Axel still heard it. Hey, it's not your fault. I've just stopped trusting people due to certain reasons, he explained, not wanting to hurt her. Martina was not a stranger. He knew her well and he knew she wouldn't reveal it if she said so. It's just that, he doesn't trust his judgment on this matter anymore. It's better to be on the safer side since the secrets are too huge. Stopped trusting people. That made Martina think about his circumstances. He was an orphan, that much she knew, and from the brief glimpses of memories she had glimpsed when she had tried reading his mind, she was sure that his life had not been pleasant. She could understand some of his pain since she was an orphan herself in her previous life, but, compared to him, her life was quite smooth sailing until the end since she had good relatives on both sides as well as a few nerdy friends she could trust. And in this life, she had her loving family whom she could trust with almost all of her secrets. So, it saddened her a lot to think how his life until now must have been, to have this outlook towards life. No, this isn't right, she thought. Having this state of mindset is wrong. Axel is missing out on too much. She decided in her heart that she'll find out more about his circumstances and help him out, especially since she might have died tonight if not for him. But right now, since she had regained her composure, she needed to properly express her gratitude. So, she smiled, "Don't worry, I don't mind signing the contract. After all, you just saved my life. I don't even know how to thank you," she exclaimed, giving him a hug. Axel froze. There it is again, he thought uncomfortably as he attempted to push her away. Though, in the next second, Martina opted to separate on her own initiative as she turned her face away from him, her long purple hiding her face completely like a curtain. Martina touched the tip of her ears, which were feeling hot for some reason. As a recluse, close contact with the opposite gender was, of course, a big no for her, but she had been comfortable with Axel since she viewed him as a person very younger than her. But, for some reason, when she hugged him just now, she felt a bit flustered. She reasoned that it must be because Axel's temperament and physical appearance don't match his age, so her antisocial tendencies were kicking in. Anyways, how did you end up here?" she asked, changing the subject to hide away her mortification. Axel rolled his eyes, "Don't ask. Just be glad you're not good at being stealthy. If you weren't so sloppy, I wouldn't have followed you, and you'd have been dead by now." Martina looked at Axel in disbelief. "You actually detected me." "How?" "Well, there's only one person I know who smells like lavender," answered Axel as he got up to examine the basilisk in front of them. Martina looked at Axel with her mouth slightly agape. "Why you? You actually..." She was speechless as her whole face went red this time. But Axel's attention was already on the basilisk now. "Anyways, what are we gonna do with this thing?" Martina sighed as she cleared her head of the messy thoughts in order to answer him. Because, he had actually raised a valid question. They had won the war, but what to do with the spoils? "The first thing we do it is to cast preservation spells on its whole body. Every part of a basilisk's body is extremely precious, especially since this one is around 1,000 years old," explained Martina, also getting up to join him. Now that she had calmed down, she no longer felt afraid, and her excitement replaced her fear as she looked at the treasure trove in front of her. She continued, "Its skin has magic-resistant properties, making it a great research and development material. Its venom is one of the most poisonous substances in the world. Its eyes, which are the main conduit for its deathly gaze, also have diverse uses in potions and rituals. To sum it up, its body is a treasure from its blood, down to its bones," she concluded. Axel's eyes were already shining after hearing her. "So, how do we divide it?" he asked. They had both contributed in bringing this basilisk down. Martina hadn't contributed much to the fight, but she had brought him here and restrained the basilisk at a critical moment. So now the question was, how should they divide it? Axel was thinking 50.50 would be good enough, but they would have a problem if she asked for too much. Martina thought about it, "I only want the materials for research and experiments. Just lend me the materials. I'll return them to you along with the things I make out of these. I will just keep a few things I make out of it." Even if she did keep something, it would be for her and the 3 members in her family. Axel was confused at first, but then remembered that this girl was filthy rich, and also a genius who had invented a lot of things. It's good to be rich, he thought, skipping this matter for now as he asked the most important question. How do we sell it? Martina looked appalled at his words. Sell it? Why would you want to sell? Basilisks are already an almost extinct species. And this is probably the only 1,000-year-old basilisk in the world, hatched and nurtured by Salazar Slytherin himself. Its properties are much superior compared to any other basilisk. If it landed in the wrong hands, it could end up causing a lot of damage. She then scratched her head embarrassedly. Besides, we don't know any reliable channels to sell it. Whoever has that kind of money would try to directly rob it from us instead of buying it. And if I ask for my family's help, they'd find out that their precious daughter was in close proximity with a 1,000-year-old basilisk, which would be the end of my days at Hogwarts. So, it's better if we keep it to ourselves, she concluded. Axel sighed. Martina did make sense, but he was still disappointed to hear that. The expenses for his diet and potions are only increasing, and stealing little by little can only get him so far. He needs a different source of income. He had thought that he had struck it rich just now, but his hopes were dashed in the next moment. It would seem that Damien Malcolm is going to have to be robbed again soon. The guy had been a nuisance these days anyways. They got to work after that. The basilisk's body was massive, and they had to cast the preservation spell on every part of its body and move it to Martina's storage bag. It was the first time Axel found out just how big the storage bags can be from inside. Apparently they're rare, but they do exist. For example, a certain magizoologist used to have a suitcase with a whole wildlife sanctuary inside. Compared to that, Martina's storage bag still seemed much tamer. So, by the time they were done, it was already time for his morning training. Sighing, Axel had decided to choose training over sleeping. Aren't you coming? He asked, glancing back at Martina. Martina shook her head. No, I'm going to explore the chamber more. I'll tell you if I find something. Axel shrugged as he waved her goodbye. He got out of the chamber and made his way towards the Forbidden Forest. But, as he arrived at his training spot deep in the Forbidden Forest, he wasn't alone this time. A familiar silhouette was present there, casually leaning against the tree. You're late, said Akiko, pushing off the tree. Axel smirked, glad to find out that she was out. He had thought that she was deliberately avoiding him due to the training. Late? Me. Who was the one holed up in the VIP ward until now? Akiko's perpetually calm face had a ripple of annoyance at the mention of that. Anyways, you ready to train me now, sensei? Asked Axel, figuring it would not do to annoy her too much. He's already getting free training from her, through blackmail, if he must specify. He should at least not make this more unpleasant for her than it already is. Akiko nodded, looking slightly uncomfortable at being called sensei. I'm ready. Let's start with the absolute basics, she said, doing some light stretching. What's that? Akiko tilted her head, as if the answer was obvious. Hand-to-hand combat, of course, she said, cracking her knuckles. Damn, does she know? Thought Axel, not so confident anymore at the mention of hand-to-hand combat. It was already too late though, since Akiko was already rushing at Axel with a punch. Whoosh! Axel had barely dodged it when a volley of punches followed, some almost hitting him. Then all of a sudden, a kick landed on his side, which he had noticed too late. Fuck! Axel grunted as he did a side roll using the momentum of the kick to take some distance. She knows, he realized. Looks like after her loss, this girl has been closely analyzing their earlier fight in order to find his weak points. Sure enough, even though Akiko's face remained passive, the hint of triumph in her eyes could not be hidden. As I had thought, despite your exquisite skills in knife, you somehow have little to no skills in hand-to-hand combat, she derived, looking slightly puzzled herself. After all, any person with his level of skills is normally first trained in hand-to-hand combat first. So Axel, with his peerless knife skills and shitty hand-to-hand combat skills, was indeed an oddity. Sigh. Axel shrugged while sighing, not rejecting her words. When he used to be on the streets, with his small and scrawny body, he couldn't do shit against grown thugs no matter how much he tried to improve his hand-to-hand combat. That was when he first got his hands on a knife. And suddenly, the doors to a new world had opened to him. He realized that you don't need strength for knife fighting, and he had talent in this field as well. Since then, he had never looked back at hand-to-hand combat. He was still quite good at it compared to most people, but if the opponent is someone like Akiko, yeah, he's weak as fuck. So, first I'll need to train you in hand-to-hand combat, said Akiko, showing more enthusiasm than she should. Bitch. Karma, thought Axel. He could easily tell that this girl wanted some payback for the painful days she spent recuperating in the hospital. And training just happened to provide a very good excuse for that. Sparring with Akiko and a stalker. Please send power stones. It helps. And if you like my works and want to read ahead of everyone and support me, consider joining the Patreon. Patreon.com/snollygoster. Also, come to Discord to track my chapter writing progress and see illustrations of characters. Chapter 69. Encounter with a Metamorphmagus, and news about Atlantis. You are listening at novelfull.audio. During the past few days, Axel had been refraining from taking action even when someone had been following him. The first reason was, of course, because the person seemed quite skilled. This was the first time someone had thwarted his arcane eyes, and if someone can do that, then they must be damn good. The other reason was, Gorski had warned him that the organization might be coming for him soon. So, the chances of this mysterious person being from the organization are very high. He wanted to act immediately, but considering the fact that he knows next to nothing about the organization and this person, he had been testing the waters and making some preparations until now. He had to first judge whether he could actually afford to confront this person based on the stalker's skill level, behavioral pattern, and reaction to sudden circumstances. After that, he had to plan in order to catch the person with a method that won't fail, but also won't be crippling in case it's not someone from the organization. And that's what he had been trying to do these days. From what he can gather, this person is very skilled at concealment, but also very shitty at stealth and tracking. They'd randomly do things that will blow their cover. It has been very hard for Axel to pretend that he didn't notice anything. Their skill level seems to be quite high, but their reaction to sudden situations is absolute shit. He can take advantage of that. That is also why he can't wait much longer, since he has to be the one to make the first move to have the element of surprise instead of letting the stalker take the initiative. It would have been better if he waited a day or two more, but he isn't willing to delay it any longer. Let's just get this over with, he thought as he recalled Daphne's forlorn appearance throughout the day. For forcing him to be the reason for that, this stalker is going to have hell to pay. Nymphadora Tonks had been having a very hard time these days. And it was all due to a certain second-year student. When Auntie Bella had given her the responsibility to protect a boy, she had been very surprised. That black widow, actually caring about someone's well-being. No way. She had thought that the boy must have some extraordinary background, important enough to jeopardize Auntie's position. But turns out, the boy was just an orphan. More curious than flummoxed by the situation, she had still decided to do this easy job anyway, lest Auntie send her back to the boring aura training again. Since it's a hassle to keep on the disillusionment charm all the time, she borrowed Rose's invisibility cloak and began her mission. But, who would have thought that she would fail spectacularly at such a simple task? It has been a few days already, but she still hasn't been able to keep track of him most of the time. She can only see him during the class hours and in the Great Hall. The rest of the time when someone is actually supposed to attack him, he somehow always manages to escape her sight very easily. How is she supposed to protect him if she can't even see where he goes half the time? She would accept that she wasn't very good at stealth and tracking, it wasn't her forte, but she didn't think that she would be so bad to not even be able to keep track of a 12-year-old. The boy somehow manages to escape her sight every damn time she's following him. There's no way she's that bad. It's the person she's following who's out of the ordinary. That much is clear enough after keeping an eye on him for a few days. He's got the Greengrass heiress showing puppy eyes for him, he's sometimes seen talking to the princess of the Valentino family, and then there's the daughter of the Brazilian minister, who was fawning over him tonight. And then, there was Rose, who was currently training day and night after knowing that he'd be playing for the Slytherin team, obsessing over defeating him. This guy, who you'd somehow usually overlook when looking at the crowd, is unexpectedly quite popular. Even her mom and Auntie Bella are worried over him, which is extremely puzzling. Is there something I don't know, that's making him so interesting, she thought, unable to see the point. The boy is handsome, she'll accept, but the women included in the list aren't the type to be swayed by mere handsomeness. And of course, she didn't think he had used some bewitching magic or something, since Auntie Bella was also included in the list. And that woman has so much protection that even a killing curse might not do anything to her. Another question is, why the hell is his life in danger? Auntie wouldn't give her details until now, even after asking multiple times. All Tonks has managed to get out of that woman is that some organization from Atlantis is after him. That had been enough for her to start taking her job seriously and increase her curiosity even more. Atlantis is the most mysterious magical civilization, closed off to the outside world. And an organization from that place is after Axel. That generates so many questions. So, to find the answers, she followed him very closely tonight, in order to make sure not to lose sight of him at a corner like she usually does. No matter what, she has to stop failing at such an easy task. Nice. Maybe because her luck today was good, but she managed to follow him for quite far this time. Usually, she'd lose him after just a few corridors. But this time seemed different. He seemed to be traveling along the corridors which she hadn't seen much before. She couldn't help but notice that this place was nowhere near the Slytherin dorms. The corridors kept getting darker and gloomier, until they were in an area with no lights or torches at all. This doesn't seem right. Things were not looking good at all. The boy was somehow walking familiarly through the complete darkness, as if he was completely accustomed to it, while she almost couldn't even make out what was in front of her. Would it kill this guy to use a Lumos? She thought, resisting the urge to use it herself. She can't light up her wand without blowing her cover. How familiar does this guy have to be to walk so confidently in such a dark and gloomy place with no fear? It only means that he's been coming here very often. In this environment, even she is afraid of the dangers that might be lurking in this dark, abandoned part of the castle, let alone for someone so young. How is he supposed to protect himself if some kind of dark creature shows up here? It's difficult to even see anything, let alone react. Well, it seems I'll have to use that. The lens of her eyes enlarged and shifted closer to the retina, allowing her to see much better in the dark. Still not satisfied, another layer of the membrane formed behind it, bouncing back all the light on the retina. Thanks, Auntie, she thought as she was suddenly able to see well. The Black family has had many metamorphmagi over the centuries. She only knew the true uses of her ability after Auntie Bella started to train her. This ability is wasted on you, she'd said when she realized that all Tonks had been doing with her ability was pulling pranks like changing the shape and color of her nose and changing her appearance to someone else's. Metamorphing is an ability that lets you manipulate your physical body. The degree of metamorphing increases the more you train and also through some rituals. And her aunt hadn't spared any expense at either of those. So, it was safe to say that Tonks could be very dangerous if she wanted to. But, after teaching her all this, that heartless woman has also forbidden her from using these things unless absolutely necessary. Just now, Tonks had copied the characteristics of an owl's eyes into her own, allowing her to have a sort of night vision. Owls are nocturnal creatures that are able to see much better in the dark. She just adjusted the structure of her eyes to make them similar. This was just one of the many uses of her ability. Though, when she surveyed her surroundings, she got a surprise when she looked at the ground. Huge footprints could be seen, going in the direction Axel was going. Gulp. Troll footprints. She recognized from her training. Where was this boy going? Now Tonks was debating whether to keep following the boy or just stop him. But curiosity got the better of her and she decided to follow. A troll would be a bit difficult, but nothing she can't handle. Finally, she saw him entering a classroom after walking forever. Interestingly enough, the troll footprints were also leading into the classroom. What the hell are you up to? She thought as she hastened her footsteps. By now, she was sure that this boy was up to something shady. Why else would he come to this place at this time of night? Certainly not to sleep. No one can sleep in such a creepy place. Curious to find out, she went into the room and was surprised by the scene inside. It looked like a troll fight had taken place here. There were a few craters, and large footprints, with ropes lying everywhere. She had taken just a few steps in when she felt like her foot just snapped something. What the? Before she could even look down to investigate, the ropes that were lying on the ground suddenly went taut, binding around her hands and feet, leaving her suspended above the ground, unable to move. Her years of training with her aunt suddenly kicked in as her hands transformed into huge and sharp talons in order to cut through the ropes. Though, by that time, she had already been hit by a few spells at the exposed parts of her body. So, it was an invisibility cloak. Axel realized in astonishment as he looked at the stalker who was half exposed now. He had, of course, thought of this possibility, but his arcane eyes could see through normal invisibility cloaks. And he didn't want to think some cloaks could actually thwart his eyes out there. He looked at the person who had been exposed after the cloak had come off. The fuck is that? He thought, looking at the half-transformed hands of the person and the half-cut ropes. He was glad he hadn't trusted the traps. They hadn't worked against the troll, and they didn't work on this stalker as well. He further removed the cloak, exposing the face of the person, and got a surprise. You're that horror chick, right? Axel didn't know if he was more disappointed or more irritated at that moment. The person turned out to be an horror. Now, she'd either be from the organization, which would mean that the organization has already infiltrated the ministry, and if she's not from the organization, then it'd mean that an horror had been following him. Now, if he had been an upstanding, law-abiding goody.2. shoes, this wouldn't have been too worried. But too bad, he was so opposite of those things that he couldn't even count the number of crimes he had committed. Sighing, he freed only the girl's head from the state of paralysis. Speak. Why have you been following me? Tonks scrutinized the boy who was currently pointing his wand at her in a threatening manner. She had panicked at first, but after knowing that it was the boy who had designed all this, her fear disappeared. Horror chick. Seriously. I have a name, alright. This doesn't seem like a response a person caught harboring intentions to kill him or kidnap him would have. What is your name? Why have you been following me? He demanded, tightening the ropes. Ouch. Hey, stop it. I'm not into this shit. Your name, and purpose. I'm Tonks. I'm on your side, you idiot. Axel unconsciously loosened the ropes at that. Tonks. Do you have any relation with Andromeda? Tonks? Yeah, that's my mum, replied Tonks with an eye roll. Now, can we talk like civilized people instead of people with weird fetishes? She asked, indicating her bindings. So, you're that daughter on training, huh? Muttered Axel as he looked at the girl. Well, the resemblance from that woman was clearly visible. Her heart-shaped face had similar aristocratic features as her mother, but they weren't as sharp, giving her more of a girl.next.door vibe. Of course, the beauty gene seems to be present in all members of the Black family. Sigh, what the hell is up now? Though, Axel was only further annoyed at the mention of that connection. Seriously, he tries to forget the family but they keep popping up from time to time, reminding him of that day. You still haven't answered my question. Why have you been following me? Tonks glared at him. It's not like I want to, okay? But Auntie Bella forced me to guard you since your life is in danger. Axel's eyes narrowed at that. What did you say? He squashed down his irritation at Bellatrix's involvement and instead focused on the key point: what kind of danger? Is this just a coincidence, or does she actually know something? Come to think of it, Bellatrix Black is the Minister of Magic. It could be possible for her to know about the organization coming after her. After all, she did know his father. But, he wanted to confirm. Tell me, what kind of danger am I in? Free me first, alright. I thought that we'd at least established the fact that I'm not trying to hurt you by now. This position is a bit embarrassing, protested Tonks. Axel scratched his head. Well, she was indeed tied in a rather disgraceful matter, but it wasn't his fault, alright. He couldn't even see the target and he couldn't afford to miss, in case the person had ill intentions. But, he wasn't about to let up just yet. Well, you might be deceiving me with those words since you can't actually hurt me anyway. First answer what I asked. Tell me everything you know about the danger I'm in. Tonks sighed. Look, I really don't know much. Auntie Bella refused to tell me the details. All she's told me is that an organization from Atlantis is after you. Axel was shocked to hear that answer. An organization is after him, she was right about that much, but Atlantis. Now that was news to him. But Tonks had more to say, and, you're wrong to assume that I can't hurt you, she said to the still shocked Axel. Snap! Her tongue suddenly extended and licked Axel's cheek lightning quick while he was still distracted by her words. Axel backed away as he looked at Tonks incredulously. The woman gave him a smug grin as her tongue sharpened. And as if to demonstrate, she cut a rope near her with it before retracting it. That could have been you. Fuck. Axel was flabbergasted. This. Just now, while he was distracted due to the shocking revelation, this woman might have actually succeeded in taking him out if she really wanted to. He had to admit it was his fault. He really hadn't anticipated that she might be able to do something like this, and neither had he calculated this in his plans. She had been paralyzed from neck down, but she was able to attack him with just her mouth. You have a sharp tongue, muttered Axel with some envy. He definitely wants this skill. Thanks. I get that a lot, Tonks accepted with faux humility. Axel raised his wand at her in resignation, as if he was about to free her. You really don't know anything else? Yep, that was about it. Are you going to free me now? This is really uncomfortable. She demanded, wiggling her body as she tried to close her legs which had been spread apart. Yes. Axel finally agreed after thinking about it. Brilliant, stupefy, but before Tonks could celebrate, she had been hit by a stunner. But only after I confirm it, finished Axel, re-paralyzing her head for good measure. Does this woman actually think he'd free her after she revealed such a scary ability? She could have almost taken him out using just her tongue. What would happen if he freed the rest of her body? Nope, he can't do it unless he's sure about her intentions. He has issues trusting even his friends, let alone a stranger. Let's see, he thought, prying open the girl's eyelids. He was about to use legilimency on her. Though, since he still wasn't much proficient in it, there are chances he might damage her or his own mind if he dug too deep, or worse, get detected by her. If she finds out that he had infiltrated her mind, too many problems would crop up. So, it's better if he just found the information on the surface. Let's see. Legilimens. He muttered, using the spell in the way he learnt from the system. By now, he was skilled enough that he could at least access the surface thoughts of the person without getting detected. At once, his mind entered hers. Inside, there were thickly built shields, but Axel was able to get past them. The legilimency training provided by the system was obviously much superior, and Tonk's occlumency shields were fully developed yet. When he finally reached her surface thoughts, a slew of information bombarded him, making it very difficult for him to navigate through them. Let's see. Metamorphmagus ability. Only acquired through inheritance. Too bad, damn, she had so much planned in case he was hostile. Couldn't tell with her casual bubbly persona. What? There's a wet patch somewhere. Maybe being tied up wasn't bad. Unrelated. Here it is. Stupid auntie, can't even tell the details, why does she have to act all mysterious? Just an organization from Atlantis. Yep, this is it. Since he got what he wanted, he exited her mind since he can't use it for too long yet. So, she was telling the truth, huh? Muttered Axel with some surprise. It's hard to believe, but there actually is someone who wouldn't lie in captivity. It would seem that she really didn't plan to harm him, and the information regarding Atlantis is true. Atlantis, damn. This makes so much sense. Why else had he been unable to find anything about the organization? It would make perfect sense if it's from a place that's shut down to the outside world. But, how did that minister know about this? Is it because she knew his father? If his father had been a part of the organization, then, does that mean he's also an Atlantean? What about his mother? Where was she from? How much did that minister know? Does she know more about the organization? Would he actually have to face her and ask, after what she had done a year ago? Axel had so many questions. Just fuck it, he'll think about that later. Right now, it's already very late and he also has a dangerous aura to deal with. Atlantis, deep inside the ocean, a huge city, spread over hundreds of thousands of miles, filled with space extension magic was hidden. In this place filled with ancient architecture, a huge castle dominated the central land, spanning over a few hundred miles. The castle was luxurious and lavish, with different kinds of jewels shining with magic embedded in it. Powerful wards surrounded the castle, giving it an even more grand and intimidating air. But, this was just a show. The castle had lost its power with no one to rule it. Thus, Atlantis wasn't as peaceful as it looked anymore. Inside this castle, in a luxurious bedroom, an old man was lying on a majestic bed. Though contrasting from resplendence around him, the old man appeared rather pale and haggard. "Father. Is there really no way?" asked a woman with dark blue hair and eyes. She had an exquisite appearance, worthy of someone from the royal family, but currently, her eyes had traces of tears and she looked exhausted. The old man coughed, "None that I could." Cough, think of, my daughter. At this point, the throne can only be inherited if you have absolute power. Forgive me. Antilla, cough, I've been an incompetent ruler, and father. Antilla, the second princess of Atlantis, only shook her head, "No, father. It is I who has been incompetent. If I was only as capable as sister, it wouldn't have come to this." Hearing about his lost daughter caused the king to go into another round of coughing. "Atlina." He whispered the lost daughter's name between coughs. The princess grew frantic as she fished out a box from the beside. "Father, do not worry about sister," she said, opening the box and revealing a brightly glowing blue pearl inside. "See. It's still completely fine." The king took the pearl in his hands, as only then did his breathing relaxed. Both father and daughter looked at the pearl with worry and hope. Because they knew what the pearl signified. It was their only source of hope left now. For as long as the pearl was glowing, it meant that Atlina, the powerful first princess of Atlantis, was still alive and well. Looking at the king who had fallen asleep clutching the pearl, Antilla sighed as she let her weakness show on her face once again. "Sister, where are you?" She wondered, recalling the explosion that shook Atlantis more than a decade ago, taking away her sister along with her sister's lover. Axel now knows about Atlantis. This reserves a trip, right? And the first princess is actually alive. How? And where did she disappear to? 3,600 words, the biggest chapter. And it's chapter 69, my favorite number. Power Stones. Come read ahead and support me on Patreon. patreon.com/snollygoster. Chapter 70. Previous one was 70, Sparring with Akiko, a Stalker. You are listening at novelfull.audio. I posted the by mistake so I deleted it. Those who already read, well good for you, and those who did, it's even better for you. This is chapter 69, that was 70. Sigh. In the clearing deep inside the forbidden forest, Axel and Akiko faced each other bare-handed. Axel rubbed his side where the kick had landed. They were just sparring, so of course it didn't hurt. But it was more of a mental blow. Well, this brings back memories, he thought, feeling the overwhelming gap between them. This gap is why he had quit hand-to-hand combat in favor of knife. Though at that time, the gap was due to his weak body and with no combat instincts. This time though, in comparison to his opponent, he had superior physical stats, better dynamic vision, and better instincts. But still, with his crude hand-to-hand combat skills, there's not much he can do against this fighting machine trained professionally with the best techniques. Swish. Akiko didn't give him time to think. She was on Axel once again as she swung her long leg to kick his face. But it actually turned out to be a feint, as a roundhouse kick was coming for his face before he could counter. When he blocked that, he was instantly trapped in a grapple as his head was enveloped between Akiko's thighs. In the next moment, he was flung to the ground with an incredible force, knocking the breath out of his lungs. Not so easily. Akiko might have overwhelmed him with her skills, but she would have no idea that this much beating couldn't even put a dent to Axel. Pain tolerance. 87%, yep. This was the same guy who took cruciatus for 10 minutes straight with a perfectly conscious and sane mind. Not even a second after he had fallen, Axel had already freed his hand to land a solid punch across Akiko's cheek, flinging her off himself. He then flipped backwards off the ground to take distance. She got me good, he thought, deactivating his arcane eyes. He had activated it at a very low intensity just when she had started attacking. Cracking his neck, Axel recalled the series of attacks he had faced in their brief exchange just now. They were all part of a single move, synchronized in a way that defending against everything would be very difficult, much less counter with his crude brawling. Especially since now she already knows that injuries have no effect on him. And he also can't use too much force since he doesn't want to hurt her too badly. Suffice it to say, he can't beat her like this. But this is good. A grin threatened to break from Axel's face. Before getting the system, he had never received any sort of training. But he had still managed to be skilled at many things. At that time, all that he had learnt was through observing, relentless practice, and real fights. And in those fights, you couldn't afford to try something you weren't good at. The things he had observed were pretty also mediocre since you can't find many experts on streets. But now, he had someone who had mastery in many techniques. And she's also not trying to kill or maim him. This is a perfect opportunity to learn. What more could he want? Her moves, which he had seen under slight usage of arcane eyes, played in his mind, and he started to absorb and assimilate. Meanwhile, Akiko was still stunned as she felt a familiar pain in her jaw. She couldn't even understand how she got punched. Not even a second after she had hit Axel with a deadly combo, a punch had landed on her before even she could recover. So, how did he recover? My turn. Before she even came out of her shock, she heard Axel's voice as he attacked her with a few rough punches with his non-existent style. He really is an amateur at this, she thought, easily deflecting the first few punches. But then, a series of master jabs were suddenly thrown at her, almost catching her off guard with the familiar combo. This is... she exclaimed in her mind as she blocked the suddenly thrown kick to her side, mirroring the move she had just gotten him with in their very first exchange. This was the very same combo she had used against him. But surprisingly, the kick actually turned out to be a feint, similar to the second combo she had used on him. The incoming roundhouse kick came so quickly that she could only brace herself to block it. Bomb! The force generated was enough to knock her to the ground even after that, as her arms went numb. What was this power? It was much more than what he has shown until now. If she hadn't defended in time, another trip to hospital wing was in order. Oh, my bad, I couldn't control my power properly since I was trying it out for the first time, she heard Axel's casual apology at that moment, which made her realize that he had been pulling his punches all this while. Her jaw might have been broken otherwise. But now the question is, how much strength does he actually have? That's how their hand-to training began. Since he had run out of surprises and they were both trying not to seriously hurt each other, Axel got beaten up most of the time due to his low experience and skill level, but Akiko could no longer disdain him for it. He was getting better with each exchange. Akiko took her task seriously. Along the way, she gave him instructions and pointed out his flaws from time to time. By the time they were done, Axel had at least gotten something good out of his beating. Arcane martial arts. 2%, yep, he had finally unlocked this thing since he had gained the threshold mastery required to unlock the skill. Plus, he could now train his heal by healing the injuries he had gotten from the exchange. Overall, he'd say today was turning out to be a very productive day, adding his earlier exploits in the Chamber of Secrets. Rotating his arms and shoulders, he looked at Akiko resting against a tree trunk. Thanks. I learned a lot, and it was a nice warm-up. All his muscles, which were stiff from too much intense training, had loosened now. He felt like he could do better than yesterday. Is he kidding? Akiko, who was panting slightly due to the exertion with her aching body resting against the tree trunk, didn't find Axel's joke funny. If this was a warm-up, then the real workout would kill anyone. Not knowing Akiko's thoughts, Axel exited the clearing. He would have liked to keep training, but it was already time for classes. Exiting the forbidden forest in stealth, he went to physical training class as he cancelled his stealth. Who did this to you? Asked Daphne as soon as she saw him. Don't worry, it'll go away soon, said Axel. You still haven't answered my question. Axel didn't hide it, I was training with someone. Daphne was surprised, it was just one person. Did they cheat or did you not cheat? She didn't know exactly how strong Axel was, but she knew that if it was just one person, Axel wouldn't be beaten unless he doesn't cheat or the other party takes him by surprise. A hint of a smile crossed Axel's face. I was holding back. Even when she doesn't know much, she still has absolute faith in his sleaziness. Daphne rolled her eyes. Whatever. She then grabbed his hand as she began dragging him away. Where to? He asked, looking at her weak hands trying to drag him. Hospital wing. We can't have you attend the physical training class like this, can we? It must be painful, she said worriedly as she lightly poked a particularly nasty bruise on his arm which hadn't healed yet. What about the class? You think I give a fuck? Amused, Axel let her drag him as she carefully steered him out of the crowd. He didn't know why, but he recalled the conversation he had with Martina this morning. I've just stopped trusting people due to certain reasons. That's what he had told her at that time. But, looking at the blonde pushing aside other people to take him to the hospital, he realized that he did, in fact, trust this girl to some extent. Though, her mental defenses are too weak for me to tell her anything, he thought with dissatisfaction. It didn't help that she was weak as fuck. Oi, he called, tugging her hand. What? asked Daphne, still busy navigating through the crowd. Let's not go to the Mahudakoro classes. I'll train you instead, he said out of nowhere. The Mahudakoro classes weren't compulsory, but one would have to do homework and assignments if they're not attending them. Though, in the past few days, their popularity among the students had reached the peak. The classes were fun and such valuable knowledge was being taught on such a rare opportunity, no one was willing to skip them even if the school begged them to. But, Daphne didn't even consider any of that as she stopped for a moment. We'll be training, just the two of us. Sure. She exclaimed, finding the prospect too good to be true. Not because Axel was going to teach her some priceless knowledge though. She didn't know that. She was simply happy for a different reason altogether. Yeah, I guess. Answered Axel, wondering if she misunderstood his question. He was asking her to skip the class that everyone was so pumped to attend. Though, Daphne only nodded her head blissfully as they continued on their way. Skipping classes together. Isn't this progress? Along the way, Daphne kept murmuring strange things in a low voice. As they exited the crowd, Axel turned his head back, only to see no one following them. He quickly wrung his hand out of Daphne's grasp. What happened? Asked Daphne, looking like a puppy who had been kicked. Nothing. Replied Axel coldly. What's wrong with him these days? Thought Daphne despondently. This wasn't the first time Axel had suddenly pushed her away. It has been happening for the past few days and she's really beginning to get worried. On the other hand, Axel sighed. For the past few days, someone has been following him from time to time. Usually, it's not an uncommon thing for someone to follow him, but this person is actually extremely skilled, making him worried. He has been cautious from the beginning. After dinner, he always goes into stealth to go to his secret hideout. He's also in stealth when he's alone wandering in the night or going to training in the Forbidden Forest. The rest of the time, he's usually in public. So, the stalker hasn't done anything yet. And Axel also hasn't done anything either since he wants to catch this person alive with no chance of escape. Is it the organization already? This was his main suspicion. He wasn't exactly ready yet. And he had been careful to not show off too much power in public these days, to make them lower their guard and not show any real weakness either. That's why, Axel had been careful not to be too friendly with Daphne in public these days. If they find out that he has a close relationship with her, they might use her to get to him. But, how could he explain this all to Daphne? As he already lamented, her mental defenses are too weak. Though she has been training since an early age and she has talent, so there's hope. But for now, she'll just have to suck it up. He'll start training her as soon as he's handled this skilled stalker, whoever it is. At dinner that night, Patricia came to sit beside him. What is it? Asked Axel in irritation. Patricia smiled, why? Can't I sit here because I want to? Of course you won't. You usually sit with students with a powerful family background. Axel wasn't the one who said this. It was Luna who was sitting on the other side of Axel. Axel gave the dreamy girl a thumbs up while eating. Good girl. Perhaps there's hope for you yet. You observed right. Just don't say these kinds of things right in front of the person in question. Not to anyone's surprise, Luna was still mostly friendless, at least in House Slytherin. Axel had been trying to help her whenever he could. At least through his guidance, she now doesn't hesitate to call Martina on the slightest problems, so it's mostly Martina's problem now. Still smiling, Patricia ignored Luna's comment. You know, it's been really hectic in the Slytherin house these days. I'm in a very precarious situation right now. So I heard, replied Axel, putting more tasteless boiled food in his mouth. Patricia sighed. There's no beating around the bush with this guy. Actually, a lot of Slytherins are dissatisfied with your nomination as the Seeker. And they need proof of your qualification now. So what? You want me to give a trial now? You think I need one? Patricia smiled fawningly at him as she put a hand to his shoulder. No, of course not. You're the best one I've ever had, dear. But, I'm facing a lot of backlash now. Lady Patricia, said Axel, cutting her off as he removed her hand, I'd like to say, I'm deeply apologetic, that I don't give a fuck about your situation. You had promised that I won't have to go through any hassle. Don't say empty words if you don't have the ability to back them up. I'd sooner play for Hufflepuff than give a trial to those arrogant bastards when I'm already doing them a huge favor by playing for Slytherin. Patricia looked horrified. You can't. I actually can, Princess, Axel grinned. There's no rule banning the students from playing for another house. And there are a few precedents of it happening as well. I've done my research. Actually, Daphne did it for him, but who's gonna call it out? He was already aware of the Slytherin's dissatisfaction with him. And he wasn't about to be the one to bend in front of them. If they went too far, he had the option of playing for another house team. Giving another house a trial was much more preferable to this. Some might think he was arrogant, but he was not. He was just that good. O.org. Patricia was really terrified now. Axel, please don't leave. I'll handle everything. If you leave, it's over for me. Axel grinned inwardly. Earlier, she was all but demanding a trial, but right now, she's begging him just to stay. Well, let's not tell her that he also doesn't want to leave. It has too many complications. Besides, the worse the team, the more he'll shine. And right now, after all the players had left with Alaric Malcolm, the Slytherin team was filled with a bunch of losers aside from Patricia. He'll be the only star in the field. Well, behave from now on. Use your Slytherin mind to deal with the situation. I'll give you the Quidditch cup, he said dismissively as he finished his dinner and got up to leave. Exiting the Great Hall, he once again felt the same feeling, as if someone was following him. Usually, he would just ignore it and disappear at a turn after a few corridors. But not tonight. Tonight, he's going to take action. People who read which I uploaded by mistake, already know who the stalker is. The is a long one, and there's also shocking reveal on Atlantis. If you wish to read ahead and support me, come to patreon.com/snollygoster.